Chapter 1375. What about children? It doesn't matter. As long as we are together. Are you afraid that we won't have children? Lily became even more anxious and said, How can I not be afraid? I said, Ming stopped her from speaking. Do you want to hear what my regret is? I want to, but you have to call for our child first, Lily pleaded. If you don't call for him, what if he doesn't listen to me and doesn't come? All right, how should I shout? That's right. Children of Ming and Lily, come here quickly. Daddy and Mommy need you. Daddy loves you. No matter what I did wrong in the past, I know I was wrong. I beg you to come back quickly. Lily's heart ached, and she said, They won't come back even if you call for them like that. If I'm really pregnant, it can't be twins. This is my greatest regret. My greatest regret is that my twin boys didn't have the chance to be born. Lily felt a lump in her throat, and her eyes immediately turned red. Are you cold? Let's go. Yeah. Lily held his arm, wiped her eyes, and nodded. When Lily and Ming returned to the Shun residence, it was already very late. Old Mrs. Shun was drinking tea and chatting with Wen Fenglin and the others. When they returned, Wen Fenglin waved at Lily and said, Come here. Daddy wants to discuss something with you. Lily blinked her eyes and quickly sat down beside Wen Fenglin. Ming, come over here too. Wen Fenglin beckoned him over. Ming and Lily were equally surprised. It wasn't often that Wen Fenglin addressed them so seriously. Dad, what's wrong? Ming sat down on the sofa and looked at Wen Fenglin with confusion. Old Mrs. Shun smiled and said, Aren't you guys going to have your wedding soon? I heard from your father that it's on the 9th of next month. It's already the end of the month, and the 9th happens to be the 18th day. According to the customs of the Huaxia Empire, a man and a woman are not allowed to see each other for half a month before their wedding. For the next 10 days, Lily can stay in the capital. Anyway, you've finished your business for the day. Wen Fenglin was of the same mind. He nodded his head and said, I'll hang out with Lily in the capital for the time being. Ming, you can also go back and prepare for the wedding. The timing is just right. No, I don't think it's a good idea. Lily and Ming spoke at the same time. Both of them had the same meaning. Old Mrs. Shun took Lily's hand in rebuke and said, There's a reason why our ancestors passed down this custom. The son and daughter-in-law of the Zhang family next door don't believe in this. They're quarreling every day. Not too long ago, they even lost their child. You can't ignore this nonsense. Furthermore, the two of you have been together for so long. It's good for you to be apart for a while. Don't you agree, Wen? Annie Shun is right. Lily, listen to Daddy and Grandma. Daddy and Grandma will not harm you. However, Ming was very determined and said, No way. Chapter 1376. Lily had heard of this custom, but she had never imagined that her father and Granny Shun would put into practice. This, I won't be able to see Ming for more than 10 days straight. Lily was a little reluctant. How am I going to get through so many days? What era are we in? Do you still believe in such things? Ming's attitude was very firm. No way. I'm going back, and my wife is going back with me. The wedding is just a formality. Our relationship as husband and wife is very good. At the same time, Lily was thinking the same thing. She nodded her head and said, Granny, this is an old saying. Which young person still believes in such things? Furthermore, half a month is too long. It's not that long. When old Shun and I first got married, he was out doing business every day. We were often apart for a year and a half at a time. Don't talk about how long it's been. You've only been apart for half a month. Besides, there's a saying that absence makes the heart grow fonder. Your relationship will only get better in the future. Lily, listen to Grandma, Wen Fenglin said. During this period of time, Daddy will accompany you to have some fun in the capital. Isn't Ming's company very busy recently? Ming's father has been very busy lately. It's time for you to go back and share some of the burden with your father. When Lily heard that, she fell silent. Indeed, Ming had been spending less time at the company recently. Most of the time, he had been accompanying her. Although Ming's mother hadn't said it out loud, she was definitely unhappy about it. What was the point of spending all day with a woman instead of managing such a big company? When Ming saw that she seemed to be wavering, he became even more displeased and said, Lily looked at him and said, "My surname isn't you anymore." Ming was used to calling her that. When she said that, he was at a loss for words. Lily thought about it and said, "I think Daddy is right. Your father is getting on in years. If he gets too busy, it won't be good. You should go back first. You can set up the company first before I go back." "No way." Ming refused without hesitation. "What era are we in? Why are you still so superstitious?" Ming's attitude was very firm. Lily's heart wavered, but she was eventually persuaded by the elders. While they were discussing, the servants had finished preparing dinner. As they sat down at the table, Shun Manting returned home from work. After washing their hands, they sat together to eat. Lily was a little embarrassed. After all, the relationship between them was somewhat complicated. Shun Manting could be considered as her rival in love. Therefore, Lily didn't say anything and just kept eating with her head down. Old Mrs. Shun seemed a little dissatisfied and asked, "Where is Luoan? Why haven't you come out for dinner yet?" The servant heard this and said, "Young master went out last night and hasn't come back yet." "What about Gilia? Why isn't he back yet?" "Young master just called back and said that there are more patients today, so he can't come back. He might have to work overtime, so he asked you to eat first." Old Mrs. Shun was even more displeased. She glanced at Shun Manting and asked, "Why isn't Luoan back yet? Do you know where he went?" Shun Manting had been silent since the beginning. When she heard old Mrs. Shun's question, she wiped the corners of her mouth with a napkin and said, "He probably went to Kingstown. The new book will be released to everyone tomorrow." Book title, 99 Times Over the Wall. Hubby, can't help it introduction. I'll kiss you wherever you kiss me. She accidentally kissed his crotch, and he put a bounty of 1 million on her head. On the surface, he was a cold-hearted young master who was loyal to the country. But in secret, he was a mysterious king of the underworld. She calculated step by step and cheated him of all his firsts. Then, she left all his assets and ran away. Who knew that the next day, she would be brought to the church with a knife? He announced, "Marry me or die. Marry me. I'll marry you. Dash." Chapter 1377. Why did you go to Kingstown? Why didn't you tell your family? Old Mrs. Shun was even more displeased. "Did you go to find Yu? Shun Manting nodded. "I guess so. That's good. Divorce her quickly, and then I'll arrange your marriage for you," old Mrs. Shun said. As old Mrs. Shun spoke, she focused on eating her food. It was as if what she was talking about was no big deal. Lily paused in the middle of eating and looked up at Shun Manting. Shun Manting seemed to lower her head. Lily didn't know if it was an illusion, but she seemed to see a strange expression on Shun Manting's face. "Well, I'm full." Shun Manting stood up. Old Mrs. Shun glanced at her bowl and frowned. "You only ate so little? Even a cat eats more than you do." "Well, I haven't been feeling well recently, and I can't eat much. I'm going back to my room to work, Grandma," Shun Manting said as she turned to leave. Old Mrs. Shun was even more displeased. "Work, work, all you know is work. You'd better keep an eye on Shun Luoan. This child runs around all day, and the people from the research department call every day to find him. You should tell him to pay attention to himself. In this family, he will listen to you." When Shun Manting heard that, she felt a little sarcastic. "Will Shun Luoan listen to me? How is that possible? Shun Luo and only listens to himself. Everything else is just a plaything. She is, and so is Yi Yu. But Shun Manting still nodded and said, "Got it." With that, she walked in the direction of her room. Old Mrs. Shun looked at Shun Manting and sighed faintly. She said, "When I took a fancy to this child, I thought she would have fate with our family, but I didn't expect it to be fate with Shun Luo and... Anyway, Shun Luo and Yi Yu are not fated to be together. I can only let Shun Manting marry Shun Luo, and I think this child is also blessed." This child's life carried a baleful aura. This baleful aura not only affected her, but even the people around her would be affected by her. But once this evil will pass, the Shun family will definitely be connected to Shun Luo, and not only the Shun family, but Shun Manting herself will also be safe for a lifetime. But if she can't endure love, old Mrs. Shun knew this. She could see her destiny, but she could not see through it. Old Mrs. Shin wasn't sure if Shun Manting's evil spirit had passed or not. Come to think of it, he should have passed, right? After all, the last time she tried to commit suicide by swallowing toiletries, it was already a disaster. Old Mrs. Shun frowned and lowered her head to eat. When Feng Lin heard old Mrs. Shun's words, he asked, "Isn't this girl your granddaughter? To marry your grandson, they've been together for a long time. I don't know what possessed Luoan. In the past, he always wanted to marry Yi Yu, but after they got married, he ignored her. Later on, he got together with Manting. This matter caused quite a stir at the time. Lily should know about it, right?" Lily heard that and nodded. "I know. That's right. Forget it. Children and grandchildren have their own blessings. Let's wait for him to tell us. Let's eat." Lily had other ideas in mind. According to Yi Qianqian, Shen Luo and hated Yi Yu very much. His attitude was terrible. What was he going to do in Kingstown? Chapter 1378. After dinner, Lily slept with old Mrs. Shun as usual. Ming went to the office of the branch company in the capital to rest up. He gave Yi Qianqian a call. Yi Qianqian seemed to be very free, so she answered quickly. "Oh my, beautiful Lily, didn't you go out with your husband today? Why do you have time to call me?" Yi Qianqian's eyes were glued to the computer. She was working overtime. "Is your sister around?" Lily asked. Yu isn't back yet. Why are you looking for her?" Yi Qianqian looked at the time. "It's only 7 o'clock now. Yu has been home a little late for the past 2 days. I don't know what she's doing out there." "Well, Shen Luo and seems to have gone to Kingstown. If you see your sister, tell her that he's probably going to Kingstown to look for her." Yi Qianqian was a little surprised to hear that, but she quickly reprimanded him and said, "Don't worry. Shen Luo and might look for anyone, but he would never look for Yu. Shen Luo and has a lot of friends. Perhaps he went to look for his friends. Yu's phone number has already been changed. There's no way he would be able to find her." Hearing that, Lily felt a little relieved and said, "That's good. I heard that her relationship with Shen Luo and isn't very good. Didn't I come to the capital recently? I saw him, and I felt a little weird." "Why did he feel weird? Do you think he's very fierce?" When Yi Qianqian thought of Shen Luo, and she became angry and said, "That guy is just like that. He's weird. I suspect he's mentally ill. Even when Yu was hospitalized, he would peek at her from the door of the ward." Peek at her? Lily felt her hair stand on end. She felt a wave of disgust. "That can't be. Isn't Shun Jilia quite normal? He's fine. Why is his brother so weird?" Lily didn't dare speak loudly. After all, they were still in the Shin family. If the Shin family heard her bad-mouthing someone so openly, it would be embarrassing. She replied, "Who knows? Sigh, to think Shin Jilia is a psychiatrist. Didn't he realize that his brother was mentally ill? I reckon that even if he finds out, Shin Luo and won't say anything to Shin Jilia. Shin Jilia lives outside and doesn't live with his family." As Lily spoke, she felt that she was being a little too nosy. She quickly changed the topic and said, "I've already conveyed the message to him. You'd better let your sister know so that she'll be mentally prepared if he really goes looking for trouble with her. I'll go take a shower first. Grandma is still waiting for me to sleep." "All right, go ahead." As Yi Qianqian spoke, she suddenly chuckled and said, "You have to be careful. Don't let his grandmother take advantage of you." F***, you think too much. I'm hanging up. Bye-bye. Yi Qianqian heard Lily hang up the phone. She stared at the computer screen and let out a long sigh. She stretched her back and quickly picked up the phone to call Yi Yu's new number. Yi Yu seemed to be a little busy. After a few rings, she finally picked up the phone. "Hello, Yu. Where are you?" I'm preparing to go back." "Okay. Oh, right. Lily just called me and told me that Shun Luo and is in Kingstown. You have to be careful. He might come looking for trouble." Chapter 1379. When Yi Qianqian heard Yi Yu's words, her heart skipped a beat. No way. She didn't get a response from Yi Yu. Instead, she heard the busy tone on the other end of the line. "Shen Luo," and looked at the caller on the screen. He raised his eyebrows slightly and said, "It's still this person. Did she teach you? You changed your phone number and address. Luckily, you haven't changed your job. Yi Yuyu's expression darkened even more. She had come to Kingstown to start a new life. Her husband, her past, and everything about her had become unsightly. She had thought that even if she died in Kingstown, Shun Luo wouldn't care or ask about it. She had changed her phone number and moved in with Yi Qianqian only to avoid harassment from her former classmates and gossip reporters. Because the injury on her arm hadn't fully recovered, Yi Yu hadn't been able to film it all. Therefore, she had found a job with her good friend and manager, Mira, to do odd jobs. She had never imagined that Shun Luo would come all the way from the capital to Kingstown just to look for her. Furthermore, he had come all the way to the office. Yi Yu looked at the man in front of her with a sinister expression. It was obvious that he wasn't a kind person. Her heart ached. It had been a long time since she had seen him. Shun Luo looked even thinner. But none of this had anything to do with her. Yi Yu looked at him and asked sarcastically, "Are you here to divorce me? Why didn't you just give me a call? I'll be back right away. Why did you have to trouble young Master Shun to come all the way here for nothing?" When Shun Luo heard that, his already ugly expression darkened even further. It was as if ink had been splashed on his face. Divorce? Shun Luo took a step forward and threw Yi Yuyu's cell phone on the floor with a loud clatter. He pinched Yi Yuyu's face and pushed her. Yi Yuyu's body collided with the tall stack of documents behind her. The documents were knocked over and fell onto the table. In the empty office, the sound was particularly loud. "You want to be with your lover after divorcing me? He pinched Yi Yuyu's cheeks without any mercy. "Your lover treats you really well. Look at what you're wearing. TSK, TSK. A gemstone necklace, gemstone earrings, and such a coquettish dress. Yi Yuyu, you've gone to sell yourself, haven't you? How much a night? Do you want your husband to take care of your business?" Shun Luo's voice was not loud, but his words were enough to make a woman's eyes redden, especially the man she had once loved deeply. Looking at the man in front of her, Yi Yuyu's eyes reddened. She struggled hard, and her breathing became heavier. She shouted, "Are you crazy? Let go of me. What do you want?" Not only did Shun Luo not let go, but he squeezed her even tighter. "I'm hugging my wife. I'm hugging my wife. Why should I let go?" Shun Luo used a lot of strength. He laughed mockingly and said, "Or is it that I can't touch you now, so you want to keep your so-called chastity for your lover?" Chapter 1380. These words again. Yi Yuyu's eyes reddened. The years of torture and the years of grievance had driven her to the brink of insanity. She tried to explain again and again to let him know that it wasn't her at all. But it was useless. It was useless. Yi Yuyu grabbed his hand with both hands and tried to pull it away, but Shun Luo was too strong. She couldn't move him at all. "Shun Luo, this is NC Company, not your hospital, and not the Shun family. I advise you to let go. If I don't call the security, you'll be embarrassed." Yi Yuyu's words were full of warning. Her original intention was for Shun Luo to let go. But when those words fell into Shun Luo's ears, it became a strong provocation. Not only did Shun Luo not loosen his grip, but he tightened his grip. His masseter muscles tightened as he raised his other hand and slapped it hard on Yi Yuyu's face. Slap! The loud voice was even more ear-piercing in this quiet space. Yi Yuyu turned her head in disbelief and looked at Shun Luo. Her eyes were full of disbelief. Her face was burning. The feeling was unfamiliar, but it was like it had drilled into her bones. It hurt so much that her whole body was twitching. Shun Luo's eyes were red, and he roared, "Be *TSH. How dare you be so arrogant after cheating? You're so *king, be *TCH. As he spoke, his free hand lifted Yi Yuyu's skirt and touched her lower body. Yi Yuyu screamed and finally couldn't help but panic. She pressed his hand with both hands and shouted, "Shun Luo, Such an action was even more maddening in the eyes of a man. Shun Luo clenched his teeth and sneered. He rubbed it hard and growled, "I haven't even touched you, and you have another man. Be *TCH. What are you doing?" A loud voice interrupted Shun Luo's words. Before Shenluo and could turn around, his arm was held tightly. Yi Yu's heart calmed down. She turned her head gratefully and saw a familiar face. Ah, it's really you. Shenluo and released Yi Yu and swung his fist at Li Jinnan's clean face with all his might. Li Jinnan had just finished his work and was holding a laptop in his hands. Out of the corner of his eye, Li Jinnan caught a glimpse of Shenluo and's fist coming toward him. The sharpness of a soldier suddenly burst forth, and he reflexively lifted the computer to block Shenluo and's fist. Shenluo and's punch missed, and he was furious. He was about to punch again, but Li Jinnan's skill was obviously better than his. She turned the laptop around and slammed it into Shenluo and's face. Shenluo and screamed in pain and immediately turned his face away. Li Jinnan took the opportunity to twist the bones in his hand and pin him to the ground. Shenluo and's hands were twisted, and his head was pressed to the ground by Li Jinnan's laptop. He struggled for a while, then suddenly laughed. I've long heard that third young master, Li, has an extraordinary background. You're a retired major, but I didn't expect you to be so powerful. Of course, Li Jinnan knew this person. He narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "This is my company. I have no opinion on what you want to do with your wife, but you'd better change the venue. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll have to spend the night at the police station." Chapter 1381. Li Jinnan turned his head and saw Yi Yu's swollen face. He frowned and asked, "Did he really hit you?" He seemed to have heard something, but he couldn't hear it clearly. He didn't expect that the man would really hit a woman. "You're not a man." Li Jinnan's tone was scornful. When Shenluo heard that, his masseter muscles tightened. He struggled even harder and said, "Damn it, let go of me." "Let go of you? What do you want?" Li Jinnan had no intention of letting go. He handed the laptop to Yi Yu. "Hold it for me." Yi Yu reached out to take it, but Shenluo took advantage of the moment when Li Jinnan let go to suddenly flip over and sit up. He turned around and pushed Li Jinnan hard. Li Jinnan didn't react in time. When he was pushed away, his whole body fell backward. But he was a martial artist after all. Li Jinnan's body staggered, but he quickly steadied himself and caught him. Shenluo's eyes were filled with indignation. He reached out and wanted to choke Li Jinnan, but his hands were firmly locked behind his back. It was obvious that the strength and skills of the two were not on the same level. Shenluo's hands were twisted painfully. He sneered and said, "Yi Yu, are you trying to murder your husband with your mistress?" "Mistress?" Li Jinnan frowned and tightened his grip. In a low voice, he said, "Watch your mouth." Shenluo's hands were locked behind his back. The pain made his face pale, but his expression became more sinister. He sneered and said, "You dare to do it, but you don't dare to let others talk about it?" The boss of NC Entertainment, the pride of the Li family, third young master Li, actually keeps a man with a woman. If this gets out, what do you think the consequences will be? Shenluo, watch your mouth. GM Li and I don't have that kind of relationship. Don't think that everyone is as dirty as you. Yi Yu was so angry that her face turned red. She shouted, "I don't know why you came to Kingstown. If you just came to humiliate me out of boredom, then congratulations. You succeeded. Can you get out now?" Shenluo's face darkened. He stared at Yi Yu and said, "If it's not that kind of relationship, are you selling yourself for a job?" "Shut up." Li Jinnan gritted his teeth and dragged him toward the elevator. "You are the young master of the Shun family in the capital. Have you lost your manners?" Li Jinnan grabbed Shenluo and then quickly made his way to the elevator. Yi Yu grabbed Li Jinnan's laptop and quickly followed him. She pressed the button for the elevator. "You have manners. Wait till your wife makes you a cuckold. Let's see if you still have that kind of manners." Shenluo's lips seemed to be curling into a smile, but the malice and viciousness in it were completely exposed. "You're also a beast in human clothing. Otherwise, why would you sleep with someone else's wife?" That made Li Jinnan even angrier. After they got out of the elevator, Li Jinnan shoved Shenluo forcefully and said, "She's your wife. What's in it for you to humiliate your wife like that? I don't have that kind of relationship with her." He looked at Li Jinan and raised his eyebrows. He tilted his head and looked at them. His gaze was indescribably sinister. That had better be the case. Otherwise, no one will have an easy time. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Yu. Come here, my wife. The new book, 99 Times Dating, Hubby Can't Help It, has been published and is awaiting review. It will be available to everyone in the morning. Chapter 1382. Although he was calling her his wife, there was no intimacy between them. Instead, there was an indescribable sense of malice. Li Jinan frowned. Judging from Shen Luo An's expression, it was obvious that he had come with ill intentions. Yi Yu's expression was one of resistance. She looked at him pleadingly and said, Jam Li, help me. I beg you. I advise you to mind your own business. Since you have nothing to do with her, you better turn around and leave now. Shen Luoan walked toward Yi Yu. Third young master Li, you don't have to worry about us. Yi Yu stepped back and said, Shen Luoan, you weren't like this in the past. If you want to take revenge on me, you've already done it. What else do you want? Please, let me go, please. Those words were naturally directed at Shen Luo, but more importantly, they were directed at Li Jinan. Shen Luo An's face darkened. He strode forward and grabbed Yi Yu's hand. Before he could pull back, Shen Luo and felt a sharp pain in his arm. A hand had grabbed him. Li Jinan twisted his hand violently. Shen Luo was caught off guard, and he screamed in pain. Go! Li Jinan shouted. Yi Yu didn't dare to stay any longer. She placed Li Jinan's laptop by the side of the clean flower bed and ran down the stairs like the wind. Shen Luo An's hand was twisted, and his face was a little pale from the pain. He frowned and sneered. Li Jinan, since you are not her lover, aren't you being too diligent in meddling in the family affairs of a married couple? Li Jinan looked at Shen Luo and Li Jinan's face darkened. In a low voice, he said, Miss Yi is my employee. In my company, I have to be responsible for her safety. He turned his head and saw that Yi Yu had already walked far away. Only then did he release Shen Luo. He turned around to pick up the laptop by the side of the flower bed. Even after the confrontation with Shen Luo, Li Jinan didn't show any signs of fatigue. His face wasn't red, and he wasn't out of breath. In contrast, Shen Luo looked a little worse for wear. It was no wonder that Yi Yu would fall for such a man. But how could that be? Even if they said that there was nothing between them now, what about in the future? At the thought that Yi Yu could accuse him of being a cuckold at any time, Shen Luo An's heart felt as if it had been stuffed with a ball of cotton. He couldn't move it up or down. It was extremely uncomfortable. Shen Luo looked at Li Jinnan's back as he prepared to leave. He raised his leg and kicked him hard in the back. Li Jinnan never expected Shen Luo to launch such a sudden attack. Caught off guard, he fell straight down. As a soldier, Li Jinnan subconsciously adopted a defensive posture. A 9-meter-tall man rolling down a flight of stairs that was more than 10 stories high was no laughing matter. Li Jinan fell to the ground and gritted his teeth in pain. His face and body were burning with pain. He looked up and saw Shen Luo walking down with his laptop. He smashed it viciously at Li Jinan and said, "Be ****. Serves you right." In the time it took Shen Luo to walk down, Li Jinan had already recovered. He leaped up and caught Shen Luo on the ground. Shen Luo didn't expect this guy to be so tenacious. He was surprised, but he laughed and said, "I really underestimated you." Chapter 1383. What happened? The building's security guard finally ran out. When he saw the scratches on Li Jinnan's face, his heart skipped a beat. Jam Li, this. Li Jinnan only glanced at him with a dark expression. He ignored him and said, "You underestimate a lot of things." He turned to look at the computer on the floor. The metal body of the computer was already a little twisted. It wasn't hard to imagine what the screen inside looked like. Liquid flowed down from his forehead, and Li Jinnan's vision was quickly obscured. He wiped it with his hand and said, "How long do you think I'll be locked up for intentional assault and damage to personal property?" Shen Luo made up his mind and laughed coldly. "You dare to send me to the police station? See if I dare." Li Jinan pressed him down and turned to the security guard. Give me a rope. The security guard felt guilty and quickly did as he was told. The police station was right next to the building. Li Jinan opened the door with familiarity and walked in. Very quickly, the police inside looked over. One of the young police officers who looked a little too robust saw Li Jinan and quickly ran up to him. As soon as he walked in, he saw Li Jinan's appearance. He gasped and asked, "Third brother, did this guy do this?" The scratches on Li Jinan's body weren't serious, but they looked hideous. The police officer's heart ached for him and said, "Aya, such a handsome face. How can you be disfigured? Come over here and let me help you apply some medicine. Son, come and detain this guy." Coming. Li Jinan shook his head and waved his hand. There's no need. This kind of injury was nothing to Li Jinan. It was just a superficial scratch. You damaged personal property, and you even ambushed me and kicked me down the stairs. I'm afraid the computer can't be used anymore. You decide what to do. Li Jinan released him and touched his face. There wasn't any blood, but it hurt a little. Under such circumstances, his image wasn't going to be any better. All right. Leave it to me. Come, third brother, let me apply some medicine for you. Mo Yuanshan pulled Li Jinan and asked, "Who has this got to do this? Is he tired of living?" "He's from the capital. His surname is Shun." Oh. Mo Yuanshan didn't know what kind of famous people there were in the capital and who Shun Julia was, but from what Li Jinan said, it seemed like he was very powerful. No matter what, in Kingstown, third brother, you don't have to be afraid of anyone. Mo Yuanshan cleaned Li Jinan's wound and asked, "By the way, is your older brother married? He's already 33 this year, right?" Li Jinan glanced at him and asked, "Why? Are you going to introduce someone to him?" "You even know that? That's amazing. I really have someone to introduce to him." "Don't say that to me. Tell that to my older brother. My parents and grandpa are all rushing him." If he could be moved, he would have done a long time ago. Li Jinan gasped. "Be gentle. Hey, what about you? I'm getting married next month. You have to come. You're already 29. You're not young anymore. It's time for you to find a girlfriend." "I have a—" "Stop, don't talk. Can you apply the ointment quietly? If not, I'll go home and do it myself." Mo Yuanshan immediately shut up and quietly applied the ointment. After 10 seconds of silence, he spoke again. "What's going on between you and that Shinjilia? Is he looking for trouble with you?" Chapter 1384. Furthermore, he hadn't had much contact with Yi Yu recently. Even when Yi Yu had been hospitalized for a month, Li Jinan had only visited her twice to avoid arousing suspicion. That night was Yi Yu's first time. It was also his first time. Li Jinan had never tasted a woman before, but that night wasn't bad. Originally, he had thought that he would be responsible for Yi Yu. Regardless of whether it was a scheme or an accident, it was still a one-night stand. He would accept it. Who knew that she was already married? Based on Li Jinan's upbringing, he wouldn't get involved with a married woman. However, perhaps all men had a strange, deep-rooted bad habit. A woman that he had slept with, regardless of whether he liked her or not, would always leave a deep impression. Therefore, while Li Jinan avoided arousing suspicion in his personal life, he would intentionally or unintentionally take care of her at work. Could it be that he was taking care of her too much? Was that why she had attracted her husband's attention and taken such extreme measures? Li Jinan guessed in his heart and was slightly distracted. Mo Yuanshan called out, "Third brother?" "Yes." Li Jinan looked at Mo Yuanshan. "Is it done?" "Yes. That guy's confession is out. He said that you seduced his wife." Mo Yuanshan looked at the confession and laughed out loud. This guy must be crazy. Can't he come up with a better excuse? "Third brother, don't worry. Leave this matter to me. It's a small matter." When Li Jinan heard that, he became more and more annoyed. He stood up and said, "Fine. You settle it. I'm leaving." "All right. Be careful." Li Jinan walked out of the police station and returned to the company's garage to retrieve his car. His heart was filled with displeasure. Li Jinan lit a cigarette and started smoking. He looked at the broken computer in his hand and felt a headache coming on. He dialed Luo Zhan's number and started the car. When he arrived at Luo Zhan's house, he seemed to be extremely busy. The smart door opened. When Li Jinan entered, he saw Luo Zhan's fingers flying across the keyboard. Luo Zhan turned his head and saw Li Jinan's bandaged face. His eyelids twitched. F***CK. Third brother, were you in a fight? Li Jinan wasn't in the mood to explain. He said, help me export the documents. I need them tomorrow. That's it. Luo Zhan was speechless. Your second brother also knows how to do it. You should ask your second brother. Looking for my second brother? How am I supposed to explain my face? What if the children saw it? If my sister-in-law saw this, wouldn't she tell Grandpa and my parents? Li Jinan was a little annoyed. You're still the most reliable. Even if I suddenly come to your house, you're not afraid of bumping into a woman. Luo Zhan was Luo Zhan after all. He pursed his lips and honestly found a USB flash drive to direct it to him. He took out a pack of cigarettes and lit another one. Brother Luo, you've had a girlfriend before. Why do you think a woman would reject her husband? Luo Zhan said, I did have a girlfriend, but I didn't have a deep relationship with her. Therefore, it was impossible for it to reach the stage that he mentioned. What do you think? It's probably because the man is not good enough, Luo Zhan said casually. When those words fell into Li Jinan's ears, he had a sudden realization. So that was how it was, no wonder. Chapter 1385. After thinking about all this, Li Jinan suddenly seemed to understand. Li Jinan exhaled a long puff of smoke. He was very sympathetic and tapped the cigarette ash. Luo Zhan frowned and said with disgust, you should control your smoking addiction. We are a family. Your second brother doesn't smoke. Why are you so addicted to smoking? You are the same age. My second brother has a son and a daughter. Why are you still single? Luo Zhan was rendered speechless by Li Jinan's nonchalant words. Luo Zhan angrily pulled out the USB drive and threw it on him. Well, you can go back now. Li Jinan picked up the USB drive and patted Luo Zhan on the shoulder. Thank you. Goodbye. Luo Zhan was speechless. F***CK. Can't you be more sincere? Li Jinan didn't look back. He closed the door and left. F***CK. Luo Zhan felt that he had made a bad friend. Li Xiqing was like this. Oming was like this. Now, even Li Jinan was like this. What kind of atmosphere is this? It's too much. Is it because I'm too easy to bully? No. Impossible. It must be because they are two bullies. Luo Zhan turned back to the computer and continued to work. The more he thought about it, the more indignant he became. He picked up his phone, opened his WeChat moments, and posted, I made a bad friend. As soon as he posted it, he received a like. It was from Lily. She also commented, ha ha ha. Did you get cheated by Qianqian's husband again? Did you just find out that my husband is a good friend? F***CK. Ming and Li Xiqing are the same. Jackals of the same tribe. No one is any better. When he was about to reply, Su Qinci also liked it and replied to Lily. I wanted to say that I was cheated by your husband. You're the bad guy. Sister-in-law, oh, your husband is bad. My husband is a good guy. Sister-in-law, Lao Air, go away. My husband is at home. He didn't do anything. Don't wrongly accuse him. Sister-in-law, oh, my husband is also in the capital. He didn't do anything. Who is it? Su Qinci and Lily stopped arguing and replied to Luo Zhan in unison. Who is it? Luo Zhan was still watching with great interest, but all of a sudden, the spearhead turned to him, and he began to panic. When she was about to reply to Li Lao-san, Lily replied, Is it Lu Yihan? Su Qinci thought, It's hard to say. That guy's not a good guy, huh? Luo Zhan laughed out loud. Lu Yihan was unjustly accused. Luo Zhan had just typed a few words, all guessed wrong. Just as he sent out the message, another comment appeared. Lu Yihan, Sister-in-law, replied to Lu Yihan. Tell me, did you do something to Luo Zhan? Second sister-in-law replied to Lu Yihan. You must have done something bad again. Lu Yihan, aggrieved, who did I offend? When Luo Zhan saw Lu Yihan's reply, he couldn't help but stare at it for a while. Long time no see, Lu Yihan. Other colleagues also liked it. Some gossipy people asked him what happened, but Luo Zhan was not in the mood to reply. He dropped the phone, turned his head, and continued to work. But just as he put down the phone, he heard his phone ring. Luo Ihan, are you free tomorrow? Let's go play together. Luo Zhan looked at the message and thought he had read it wrong. He picked up the phone and looked at it several times to confirm. Chapter 1386. Luo Zhan almost screamed. Looking at the only line of words on the phone screen, his heart was beating faster and faster. Go out tomorrow? Where to go? Who will be there? How many people? Just the two of them? Countless thoughts flashed through Luo Zhan's mind, but after thinking about it, he replied slowly, What time tomorrow? I'm a little busy during the day. I have a case to do, so I'm working overtime. Luo Ihan, tomorrow night. There are a lot of friends, many of whom you know. Let's go together? Oh, a lot of friends, and they all know each other. Luo Zhan was a little disappointed. After about a minute, he replied, Okay, whatever, let's go. We haven't seen each other for a long time. Luo Zhan put down the phone, turned his head, and continued to work. Time flew by. Luo Zhan had a day of meetings, and he was a little tired. But thinking of the date tonight, he calmed himself down. After tidying himself up, he asked Luo Ihan for the address. It was a bar. There were many people there, and people in Luo Ihan's company liked to go there to have sex. There were many beautiful women and handsome men there, and the business was very good. Luo Zhan had always heard them talk about it, but he had never been there. He drove there with a GPS. As soon as he entered the bar, a beautiful woman with a slender waist came up to him, with a charming smile on her face. Luo Zhan saw the smile, and the woman was looking at him, so he smiled back subconsciously. But who knew that the beautiful woman would smile like that? And she would come to Luo Zhan and say, Why haven't you come for a long time? I miss you so much. Then she hooked one leg and hugged Luo Zhan with one arm. Luo Zhan was shocked and said, What are you doing? Seeing Luo Zhan's reaction, the beautiful woman laughed and said, Don't you know me? Last time, we went to the Shangri-La Hotel. Tonight, let's go, Hearing this, Luo Zhan knew that it must be Luo Rant's romantic debt. Pushing the beautiful woman away, Luo Zhan said seriously, Beauty, you have the wrong person. The person you know is my twin brother. I don't know you. The smile on the beautiful woman's face froze, and she pushed Luo Zhan charmingly. You're so annoying. Just say it. What are you pretending for? What's wrong? Do you have a new prey you like? Do you want me to help you as your little sister? Luo Zhan replied, No, I'm here to find a friend. I'll talk to you later. Bye. With that, he slipped away. The beauty was flustered and exasperated. Damn you, stinky man. You don't want me any more after just one time? It's not that cheap. Luo Zhan only felt as if there were needles on his back. He turned his head and saw the charming beauty just now glaring at him. He immediately turned back. Damn it, this damned Luo ran. Luo Zhan here. A familiar voice came. It was Luo Ihan's colleague. Luo Zhan walked over and saw Luo Ihan sitting in the crowd. Luo Ihan seemed to have lost a lot of weight, looking taller and slimmer. The blue veins on the back of his hands were more obvious, and his Adam's apple and cheekbones were more prominent. This fellow didn't seem to have seen second brother's sister-in-law recently. Could it be that he's lovesick? Thinking of this, Luo Zhan felt a little upset. Chapter 1387. Luo Zhan's shoulder was hooked, and Luo Ihan's colleague suddenly came up, holding a glass of wine in his hand, and said, Come on, drink up. Subconsciously turning his head to look at Luo Ihan, Luo Zhan took the glass of wine and drank it all at once. Good alcohol tolerance. The surrounding people clapped their hands, saying, Ihan, look at your good buddy drinking. Why don't you drink? Come on, it's not a big deal to fall out of love. It's not a big deal. The amount of information in these words almost made Luo Zhan spit out the wine in his stomach again. This fall out of love? This guy fell out of love? Got dumped? How could it be? Yes, don't you know? The colleagues around Luo Ihan nodded and suddenly began to gossip. She pulled Luo Zhan to sit down and said, Let me tell you, Ihan had a girlfriend some time ago. She is very beautiful and has a good figure. She comes to our company every day to see him, but I don't know why. She hasn't come recently. Let me guess, the colleague's voice had not been loud, but when it came to this point, her voice was even lower. She said, "Have you noticed that Liu Yihan has lost a lot of weight recently?" Nonsense. He had noticed it the first time he saw it. Luo Zhan turned to look at the colleague and asked, "Is it because he was dumped and he is heartbroken, so he's like this?" No, no, no. The colleague immediately shook his head and said, "How could this guy be dumped by a woman? He was the one who dumped that girl." Luo Zhan could not understand and asked why. The colleague was very excited and clapped her hands, saying, "You are asking the right question. Why? We're also guessing." Liu Yihan was playing with his mobile phone in the crowd, looking around, and finally his eyes fell on the gossip colleague next to Luo Zhan. He picked up a piece of fruit peel and threw it at him, saying, "Don't talk nonsense. You only know how to spread rumors." The colleague reached out to take the peel and said with a smile, "Of course not, but you are really amazing. You even hide it from your best buddy. You are not a good friend." The best of brothers, is that him? For some reason, Luo Zhan felt a little happy in his heart. See, at least in the eyes of others, their relationship was still very good. "Shut up, don't talk nonsense." Liu Yihan gave him a warning look, and the colleague immediately became quiet. This made things difficult for Luo Zhan. He didn't even finish his words. This feeling of not being able to go up or down was extremely uncomfortable in his heart. Luo Zhan looked at the person next to him, his face full of question marks. However, the man shrugged and said, "Hey, I'm going to the bathroom." He stood up and walked out. Luo Zhan immediately stood up and said, "I'll go too." "Didn't you just arrive? Are you going to the bathroom?" Liu Yihan knew what they were going to do at a glance and asked. But Luo Zhan didn't care at all. He turned his head and said confidently, "I have kidney deficiency." Under everyone's speechless gaze, Luo Zhan followed his colleague forward and urged, "What's going on?" The colleague turned to look behind her and said, "Ever since Yihan had that girlfriend, he's been getting thinner and thinner. We all suspect that he couldn't take it anymore, so he dumped her." Luo Zhan said, "That's impossible, right? Hey, you don't know how seductive that woman is. Let me show you a photo." She quickly took out her phone and pulled up the photo. Luo Zhan looked at it and was stunned. Chapter 1388. She had willowy eyebrows, a pair of big round eyes, a high-nose bridge, an oval face, and loose hair. She looked pure and beautiful. She was a great beauty. At first glance, she looked a bit like the wife of his second brother. Was this a coincidence? No way. Luo Zhan had seen Liu Yihan's feelings for her clearly over the years. He should just be looking for a substitute. Seeing that Luo Zhan did not speak, the colleague only thought that he was stunned by the beauty of the woman in the photo and sighed. "I have to say that this woman is really beautiful, but she is also very playful. At first glance, you can tell that she is a strong woman, so Liu Yihan can't stand it." In other words, they had slept together. Luo Zhan felt uncomfortable. Staring at the photo, he pretended to ask casually, "How is her personality?" "Personality? Quite wild and hot. I like this type. However, I can't flirt with my friend's wife, or I will." Luo Zhan could not listen anymore, turned around and walked back. "Hey, okay, I'll stop pretending. Why are you running?" The colleague shouted behind Luo Zhan. Luo Zhan's mind was full of that face. That face was indeed somewhat similar to Su Qianxi's. Quite wild and hot. That was to say, it was not the same as Su Qianxi. Su Qianxi's character was very gentle and well-behaved, and she was always with his second brother. So, did Liu Yihan break up with her because of this? Because the girl's character was actually not the same as Su Qianxi's. So Liu Yihan felt that he had found a wrong substitute. So he broke up with her. So, why did Liu Yihan lose so much weight during this time? Was it because of a bad appetite? Or was it because of a bad stomach? As Luo Zhan thought about it, the noise in front of him had been restored. Looking at the red lights and green wine in front of him, the hot women coming and going, and the frivolous playboys, Luo Zhan found that he was deceiving himself. This was the world. Liu Yihan was already an adult man. He had his own life and his own choices. Even if he really slept with that woman, so what? Anyway, it was impossible between the two of them. Luo Zhan was well aware of this, but when he thought of this, His heart became more and more uncomfortable. Sighing heavily, Luo Zhan closed his eyes and murmured, Luo Zhan, wake up. You are a man. He opened his eyes and walked forward. Compared to just now, Luo Zhan was much more enthusiastic. She drank one glass after another and encouraged others to drink, but she never looked at Lu Yihan again. Lu Yihan did not touch a drop of alcohol the whole night. Luo Zhan saw it. When he was half drunk, he looked at Lu Yihan with a glass of wine and teased, Hey Lu Yihan, why are you more and more like a gigolo? Trying to lose weight? You're so skinny that you look like a ghost. Do you know how ugly you are? Lu Yihan's eyes were sober. Looking at Luo Zhan's flushed face, he calmly said, You are drunk. When Luo Zhan heard that, he smiled and ignored him. He held the wine glass and drank it again. Lu Yihan couldn't stand it anymore. He stepped forward and snatched the glass away from him. Don't you know that you can't drink? No one will care about you even if you die on the side of the road. Chapter 1389. The woman was wearing a tight silver dress that left her shoulders bare. Her arms were fair and delicate, and her face was painted with exquisite makeup. One look was enough to tell that she was a veteran who frequented nightclubs. When the crowd saw this woman, they all whistled. Who is this? Aren't you going to introduce her to us? I didn't expect an honest boy like you to find such a beautiful girl. Not honest. Ha 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 ha. They spoke one after another, causing Luo Zhan to be somewhat annoyed. Waving his hand, Luo Zhan said impatiently, What the hell? Where did this pheasant come from? Do I even know you? When the woman heard this, her expression changed again and again. What do you mean? I already said that I don't know you, but you insist on pestering me like this. If you're not a wild chicken, what are you? Luo Zhan's tone was obviously very bad. Hey, how can you treat a beauty like this? You'll be punished by heaven if you do this. Some people around had already begun to feel pity for him. They looked at Luo Zhan reproachfully and said, Beauty, this boy is drunk. Don't lower yourself to his level. But before he finished speaking, the man looked behind her with his eyes wide open. Not only him, but even the people around him all looked behind the woman. Behind the woman, more than a dozen tall and powerful men had already walked out, all wearing tight t-shirts. They all stood behind the woman, looking at the men in front of them with unfriendly expressions. The beauty sneered, looked at Luo Zhan, and said, If you have the guts, say what you just said again. Luo Zhan's back was facing them, so he naturally did not see their current situation. But when he saw the situation of his companions, he subconsciously turned around as well. With one glance, Luo Zhan was dumbfounded. He was just simply in a bad mood, so he wanted to vent. What was going on now? Luo Zhan felt a little flustered and said, What do you want? The woman was very satisfied with Luo Zhan's expression. She turned to look at the tallest man in the crowd and said, Brother, you heard that. This guy didn't pay me, and he even King called me a wild chicken. Help me teach him a lesson. Luo Zhan was a homebody, a well-deserved homebody. He was the kind of otaku with disheveled hair and a dirty face who had cancer of laziness. His muscles had already turned into fat. Seeing this, Luo Zhan's eyes widened. He looked at the group of people behind him and said, There must be some misunderstanding. To be honest, I have schizophrenia. Just now it was my other personality that spoke. The beauty in the lead sneered and said, Then your personality switch is quite free. Big brother, beat him up. The beautiful woman waved her hand, and the muscular men behind her stepped forward. One by one, they flexed their muscles and quickly surrounded her. Luo Zhan sat where he was and suddenly sneered. He looked at them with a very calm expression and said, Are you sure you want to do this? I'm warning you, you'll regret it. My big brother is around here. If he finds out that you bullied me, you'll die a horrible death. Hearing this, those people all laughed. The leader raised his leg and stepped on the table in front of Luo Zhan. He said, Is that so? What's your brother's name? Chapter 1390. Everyone was listening attentively. Seeing Luo Zhan's serious look, they thought he really had something up his sleeve. But when they heard the roar, Everyone immediately understood. They had been tricked. The muscular man was suddenly pushed down and fell to the ground in an instant, appearing to be in a somewhat sorry state. At the same time, those who had been sitting down suddenly got up and dispersed. The muscular man who had been pushed down was furious and roared, "Stop!" His strong arm grabbed at Luo Zhan's leg. Luo Zhan lost his balance and fell forward. But the pain he had imagined didn't come. Instead, he fell into a soft and pungent embrace. Luo Zhan's lips kissed the breasts of the beautiful woman. The soft and fragrant touch would have made any man's heart flutter. But Luo Zhan wasn't an ordinary man. Such a touch that would make ordinary people feel good and happy was no different from a wild beast to Luo Zhan. Eyes wide, Luo Zhan subconsciously used his hands to prop himself up, but who knew that the beautiful woman would hug him and twist her body. She said, "Why didn't you do this earlier? What are you pretending for? We had a good time last time, didn't we?" As she spoke, the beautiful woman's mouth moved closer and asked, "You don't have a girlfriend yet, do you?" Luo Zhan's eyes widened. He suddenly felt goosebumps all over his body. This woman was obviously a slut. Not only had she slept with Luo Ran, but now she wanted to sleep with Luo Ran's younger twin brother? Puffed. How could the two good children of the Luo family be tainted by such a slut? Luo Zhan turned his head in resistance and pushed the beautiful woman away. But this action made the beautiful woman, who had just calmed down, angry again. She shouted, "Beat him up!" The surrounding people rushed forward and surrounded Luo Zhan. The people just now had already run far away. Fortunately, they didn't chase after them. The target of that group was Luo Zhan. "Hey, we just left Luo Zhan behind like this. Isn't that bad?" "No, that woman is obviously interested in Luo Zhan. Maybe she wants to develop a relationship with him. But Luo Zhan doesn't seem to like that woman. Will he really develop a relationship with her? Besides, Luo Zhan's words were so harsh just now. It's really easy to get beaten up. Shall we go back and have a look?" The sounds of discussion could be heard. Lu Yihan panted and stopped. He looked at his friends and said, "I'll go back and check. If I don't come back in 5 minutes, call the police and come back together. Do you understand?" "It's okay, I guess. Luo Zhan is very clever." "I think so too. And that woman probably can't bear to do anything to Luo Zhan. At most, she will drag him to get a room. Ha ha ha." When Lu Yihan heard that, he suddenly felt a little guilty. Would Luo Zhan accept a woman? No, probably not. This guy wasn't the kind of person who was half-hearted, and it was even more impossible for him to be bisexual. Moreover, this fellow's mouth was so despicable. He might really get beaten up. Lu Yihan thought, quickened his pace, and ran back to the bar. The bar was getting closer and closer. Lu Yihan ran in and saw the crowd. Dash. Chapter 1391. There was a lot of discussion in the crowd. Lu Yihan was shocked and rushed in at the first time. When he saw Luo Zhan, his face was already bruised and held by 2 people. Many people were looking at this side, but no one came forward. Damn! Lu Yihan only felt a rush of blood to the top of his head. Luo Zhan. Luo Zhan looked up a little awkwardly. His lips were bruised and swollen. Seeing Lu Yihan's livid face, he actually felt a little happy. Resisting the pain on his face, Luo Zhan twitched the corner of his mouth and said with a slightly teasing look, "What are you doing? Haven't you seen someone get beaten before?" This look, it was like when they were still living together. Every time he cooked, he would solemnly vow, "Today I must let you taste what is called the Manchu Han Imperial Feast." But every time, it ended in failure. Every time, he would look unrepentant and loudly say, "What are you doing? Haven't you seen a chef fail before?" Memories came to him all at once. After all, they were friends for many years. Lu Yihan's heart seemed to be blocked. His masseter muscles tightened, and he rushed forward to pull the man who was holding Luo Zhan. There was a commotion around. All of them were people who were not afraid of getting into trouble. Some people even whistled to add to the fun. No one had the slightest intention to intervene. Lu Yihan's skills were not bad, but he was just an IT man. In terms of physical strength and skills, how could he compare with those people who had been in the underworld for a long time? For a time, it was a hard fight. But Liu Han only hit a few times, and the situation was one-sided. Idiot. Luo Zhan really wanted to take him to see what a pig's brain looked like. In this case, couldn't it be over directly to the police? How could these thin arms and legs be the opponents of this group of muscular men? Just when Luo Zhan thought that he was going to be crippled here today, the crowd suddenly quieted down. Don't move. Police. Although at the beginning, the person who fell in the bar was Luo Zhan, but later, compared to Liu Han, Luo Zhan's injury seemed to be much lighter. The two were sent to the hospital by their colleagues. After a simple application of medicine, the colleagues went home, while Liu Han and Luo Zhan squatted at the door of the hospital and did not move. No one said they would leave first. The moon tonight seemed to be exceptionally round and bright. Luo Zhan looked at the sky. It was dark, and a few scattered stars were far away from the moon. They were so faint that they were hard to see. The weather of early summer was neither hot nor cold. The two of them sat on the steps and listened to the chirping of the insects around them. They did not move for a long time. I'm sorry, I've implicated you. Luo Zhan didn't look back and said in a flippant tone, that woman is my brother's mistress. She mistook me for my brother. Damn, I was almost dragged to the hotel. Fortunately, I was quick-witted. Otherwise, my wife would not be able to enjoy my virginity in the future. Alas, tonight was so thrilling. Luo Zhan had a look of lingering fear. He exhaled and said, but why did you come back in one piece? They would let me go after beating me up a few times. After all, with my looks, they wouldn't bear to beat me up too much. You're different. You're ugly from head to toe. Who else would they beat if not you? Liu Han turned to look at Luo Zhan and suddenly laughed. Why are you so shameless? His tone was relaxed, just like before. Luo Zhan was stunned and turned to look at Liu Han. Seeing his eyes that were as bright as the night stars, Luo Zhan's lips twitched, but it hurt so much that he sucked in a breath. Damn, I'm going back. I don't want to accompany you to feed the mosquitoes. Chapter 1392. When Luo Zhan heard that, he suddenly laughed. He turned around and walked toward the parking lot of the bar. Raising his head, he glanced at the hazy moon above his head. It seemed that the weather was pretty good. 2 days passed, and Li Jinan didn't appear in the office. Yi Yuyu went to work and got off work every day, but she didn't hear any mention of Li Jinan from her colleagues. It wasn't just Li Jinan. Even Shen Luo and didn't appear again. The past 2 days had been unbelievably quiet. It was as if the previous episode had been nothing more than a minor accident. Yi Yu got off work as usual. A colleague that she was close with, Xiao Su, came up to her and asked, Yi Yu, do you want to go shopping with us? Xiao Su was a very pretty girl. She was very popular in the office. Yi Yu had a good impression of her. When she heard that, she remembered that it had been a long time since she'd gone shopping. She nodded her head and replied, sure. Xiao Su's eyes immediately turned into crescents. She happily said, let's go eat then. I haven't bought clothes in a long time. Come on, let's eat our fill before we go shopping. She affectionately went up to Yi Yuyu's arm and said, you're a celebrity. You'll definitely have better taste than I do. Yi Yuyu worked at the office with the mindset of learning. Everyone in the office was aware of Yi Yuyu's identity as an artist. They all treated her with adoration and affection. It was perfectly normal for Xiao Su to say that. But when those words fell into the ears of some people, they undoubtedly sounded like flattery. Hey, Xiao Su, even if you want to suck up to someone better, you should find someone better to suck up to. People who don't know better would think that you're so shabby now. A woman who looked a little older said. Her eyes were filled with disdain and hostility. Yi Yuyu knew this woman. She and Xiao Su were from the same department. The two of them were competitors for the same position, and their results were often about the same. The difference wasn't huge. All along, Xiao Su had a good relationship with the department. It was only with this woman that she was at loggerheads with. Xiao Su obviously didn't like this woman either. She snorted coldly. It's none of your business who I want to be friends with. You're just a dog trying to catch a mouse. When she was about to turn around and leave, she heard the man say, we are all colleagues. I just don't want you to lose too badly. At first, Everyone thought that there was something between her and the CEO. After all, that kind of popular role was something that all the popular stars wanted, but no one could get it. But it was given to such a half-new and half-lukewarm artist. I just didn't expect that. The man held the briefcase and sneered as he passed by Xiao Su. Xiao Su was a little angry and said, "Why are you so dark in your heart? You got in through a proper audition. Her acting skills are much better than that thigh you hugged. It's just that her luck wasn't that good. Who would have thought that they would encounter such an accident during filming?" Little Sue's heart ached a little. Yu didn't give up on herself. She even came to the company to study. She's much better than you. The man's face was full of disdain. Idiot. With that, he walked away with his head held high. Halfway down the stairs, a rather inconspicuous Land Rover stopped in front of them. The car window was rolled down, revealing the slightly scarred and resolute face inside. He turned to look at Yu and said, "Get in." Dash. Chapter 1393. Xiao Su and the girl who had just spoken were shocked. They looked at her in disbelief. Li Jinan sat in the car calmly. The scab on his face had already formed a scab. It was eye-catching on his clean and handsome face. Yu was shocked to see Li Jinan like that. When she heard that word, she looked at the two colleagues beside her. At that moment, it wasn't just the two of them. Even the passers-by were looking at Yu strangely. Yu felt a chill down her spine. She braced herself and asked, "GM Li, is something the matter?" When Li Jinan heard that, he only glanced at her and repeated, "Get in the car." With her colleagues watching, Yu was a little reluctant. If I get in the car at that moment, what will my colleagues think? Will they think that I'm Li Jinan's mistress? Just as Yu was deep in thought, Xiao Su nudged her and said, "Yu, GM Li is calling for you. Hurry up and get in the car." Shen is nearby. Li Jinan didn't say his name. The look he gave her was unreadable. I could only get the police to keep him in custody for 48 hours. He was released last night. Yu was stunned. Her heart skipped a beat. She instinctively looked to her left and right. Yu naturally knew who Shan Lianchuan was referring to. No wonder she hadn't seen Shen Luo and for the past 2 days. He had been detained by the police. She knew that Shen Luo and wouldn't let it go so easily. "Get in the car. This is the last time." Li Jinan's voice was low. As he spoke, he started the car. Yu's heart skipped a beat. She turned to look at Xiao Su apologetically and said, "I'm sorry. Let's do it another day." With that, Yu opened the front passenger door and got in. Without waiting for Yu to fasten her seatbelt, Li Jinan stepped on the accelerator and drove forward. The car was big, but the air pressure was a little low. Li Jinan drove a little fast. Yu fastened her seatbelt, but her heart couldn't stop racing. "Miss Yi, do you love your husband?" Li Jinan asked without turning his head as he placed both hands on the steering wheel. Yu never expected that the first thing she would hear from Li Jinan after getting into the car would be that. When he buckled his seatbelt, the sound of the buckling was especially loud. She looked up at Li Jinan. His side profile, which was usually almost perfect, now had a few scratches and scabs. He still looked a little out of place. Sensing Yuyu's shocked gaze, Li Jinan turned his head to look at her. He quickly averted his gaze and looked straight ahead. Yu was still in a state of shock. It took her a long time to regain her composure. She mumbled, "GM Li, why do you ask? Your husband is sick." Li Jinan was concise and to the point. "I can tell that he's a little out of his mind. I see that you're often in Kingstown. Even when you were hospitalized, he didn't come by more than a few times. I heard from your sister that you don't have a good relationship with your husband. Is it a marriage of convenience? Marriage for show. In other words, marriage for show. It usually occurs in homosexuals and people with high status who have hidden diseases. This kind of person needed a partner to maintain their image in society, but there would be no love or sexual relationship with the partner they married. The other half of such a person was very pitiful." Chapter 1394. Wasn't their marriage just a marriage of convenience? Apart from the marriage certificate, there was no other relationship between her and Shen Luo, and that was similar to that between husband and wife. Nothing at all. The love of the past also slowly dissipated along with the coldness he had been showing all this time. Yi Yu's eyes were filled with sorrow. The smile on her face was filled with indescribable bitterness. Li Jinan took in her expression clearly. Very quickly, he turned his head back and slowly said, "Get a divorce. Marry me." If Yi Yu had only been shocked a moment ago, then she was now terrified. She looked at Li Jinan in disbelief. It was as if she was looking at a lunatic. Li Jinan drove steadily. His voice was magnetic, but his tone was cold. When he said those words, his face didn't show much emotion. In fact, he was expressionless. This must be a joke, right? Yi Yu was a little frightened. She laughed dryly and said, "GM Li, please don't make such jokes." Li Jinan turned the steering wheel, and the car turned into a small road. The car slowed down. The car quickly came to a stop. Li Jinan turned his head to look at her and asked, "Do I look like I'm joking?" Indeed, he didn't. Furthermore, would Li Jinan joke? He didn't look like someone who would joke. He was from a military background. He was a man of his word, wasn't he? But why would Li Jinan have such thoughts? Yi Yu felt a little frightened. She looked at Li Jinan without saying a word. Li Jinan looked at her. He took out a pack of cigarettes and slowly lit one. Yi Yu stared at the orange-red flame that burned the tip of the cigarette into ashes. The flame flickered, mirroring her current mood. "I've never had a girlfriend, and I've never touched another woman. That night was your first time, and it was my first time as well. No matter how you look at it, you're not at a disadvantage." Li Jinan flicked the ash off his cigarette and said, "Since your relationship with your husband isn't harmonious, it's best to get a divorce early. A marriage of convenience." The only thing that mattered between them was profit. Li Jinan didn't think he was bad. At the very least, he was much better than Shen Luo, and compared to a husband of convenience who was prone to domestic violence, an outstanding man like Li Jinan should be much more attractive. A normal woman, no matter how stupid she was, would know what to choose. Li Jinan was very confident. He didn't think that Yi Yu would reject him. When Yi Yu heard those words, she felt a little uncomfortable. Because it was her first time, and because she had never had sex with Shen Luo before, he felt that she was acceptable, so he felt that he could marry her. Was that what he meant? And would it be Li Jinan's first time? Li Jinan was only 1 year younger than Shen Luo, and he was already 29 years old. Such a man still had his first time. It was with her. Yi Yu found it hard to believe. "GM Li, I'm married. With your status and background, you can go find young and beautiful girls who haven't been married before." She couldn't understand what he was thinking. She continued, "If you feel that you need to be responsible for me because it's my first time, GM Li, I can tell you very clearly that there's no need." Chapter 1395. Equality? Yi Yu stared at the side of his face in a daze. The wind from the window was rather strong. Li Jinan's eyes were squinted by the wind. He turned his head to look at Yi Yu. His red lips parted slightly as he continued. "Now that things have already happened, I think Miss Yi is very suitable." "Very suitable? Does that mean they're very compatible in bed?" She laughed and said, "GM Li, I've been married before. That's already unfair to you. Furthermore, I don't think we're suitable for each other. Your status is too high, and your net worth is too high. I can't match up to you. Besides, it's not up to me to decide whether or not we get a divorce." Wasn't it up to her to decide whether to divorce or not? Li Jinan raised his eyebrows slightly, but in his heart, he felt that it was only natural. After all, wouldn't a marriage of convenience be formed only after reaching an agreement of benefits? He looked at her and asked, "Are you saying that as long as Shen Luo agrees to the divorce, you'll be with me?" When Yi Yu heard that, she looked at him as if he was a lunatic. He had originally thought that this fellow was quite normal and decent. Why was his way of thinking so deviant? He was as difficult to communicate with as Shen Luo, and she didn't want to pay any more attention to the man. She reached out to open the car door and said, "Thank you for bringing me here. I can go back on my own." As she spoke, she had no intention of stopping. Yi Yu quickly got out of the car, slammed the door shut, and turned to leave. Li Jinan turned his head to look. The wind outside was very strong. Yi Yu-Yu's dress clung tightly to her body, making her look especially thin and frail. Just now, she had tacitly agreed, right? Li Jinin put out the cigarette and looked at himself in the rearview mirror. He raised his eyebrows slightly. Yi Yu was a good woman. Since Shen Luo and couldn't give her happiness, he would. Yi Yu hailed a taxi. When she got in, Li Jinan's rebellious words kept replaying in her mind. There were millions of good girls in the world, but he actually persuaded a married man to divorce and be with him. The more Yi Yu thought about it, the more she felt that he was toying with her. How could a normal 29-year-old man not have had a girlfriend? Furthermore, how could a normal 29-year-old man not have had a girlfriend? Secondly, Li Jinan was so good that all the women in Kingstown would flock to him with a single word from him. Why did he have to hang himself on a tree like her? Moreover, in Shen Luo's words, she had been married before and divorced before remarrying. In the eyes of others, Li Jinan was like picking up used shoes. How could the Li's family allow their descendants to pick up used shoes? Yi Yu had figured it all out. She felt even more stifled. She cursed in a low voice, "You're crazy." The taxi driver glanced at the rearview mirror with a strange expression. Yi Yu ignored him and drove straight to their destination. Yi Yu opened the car door and made her way back home. Just as she reached the entrance of the estate, she saw a familiar figure walking in the garden in front of the estate. The man raised his head. It was obvious that he had seen Yi Yu. His hands were in his pockets. His eyes were sinister as he looked at Yi Yu with a faint smile. When Yi Yu saw the man, her heart skipped a beat. She stopped in her tracks. Chapter 1396. Shen Luo's voice was very slow. His eyes were fixed on Yi Yu. His footsteps were neither fast nor slow, but every step he took seemed to trample on Yi Yu's heart. Yi Yu looked at Shen Luo, and her heart beat faster and faster. The man in front of her had dark circles under his eyes, but it was obvious that he had freshened up and changed his clothes. He didn't look like he had been imprisoned. However, he still looked tired. His complexion didn't look good. It was obvious that he hadn't had a good time the past 2 days. Shen Luo and saw Yi Yu's expression and smiled. "Come back to the capital with me, Yu. You haven't seen Yi in a long time, have you?" Guan Kui. That name had existed between Yi Yu and Shen Luo, and for 7 years. For 7 years, that name had been a barrier between them. Even though she knew that there was such a person between them, Yi Yu still married him without hesitation after he proposed. She had thought that as time went on, dripping water would wear away a rock. Who knew? Yi Yu suddenly felt ridiculous. She wanted to laugh, but her heart ached. Shen Luo walked closer and said, "Let's go back to see her. I think she must miss you very much." Shen Luo's expression was very normal. He looked at her and slowly said, "Also, Mom and Dad have been talking about you lately. You don't want to go back during the holidays. You're the daughter-in-law of the Shun family. After all, even if your heart isn't here, you should still show the proper etiquette. If it was Yi, he wouldn't have been so rude." "Is that so?" Yi looked up at Shen Luo without backing away. "I heard that Guan Kui's condition has improved a lot recently. Didn't you go to see her? My mom asked me for something of yours last time. Didn't they contact you?" Shen Luo really didn't know about that. He frowned and asked, "Kei's better? What does she want from me?" Yi Yu carefully looked at Shen Luo's expression and smiled. "She wants your essence of a night." Shen Luo was stunned. He looked at Yi Yu, and his face darkened. Nonsense. How could Kei want something like that? Guan Kui's personality was very pure. Because of her family, she might have been a little arrogant, but she was also very kind. If one were to describe Yi Yu as a beautiful lily whose fragrance wafted from miles away, then Guan Kui would be the sweet and lovely daughter of a humble family. She was a jasmine that people couldn't help but love. She exuded an elegant and enchanting temperament from head to toe. She was so clean that she was above the common people. However, such a girl had been ruined by a wild lily in the past. Shen Luo looked at Yi Yu's face and became more and more impatient with her. He sneered and said, "She's already been forced into this state by you. At this point, you still want to defame her?" You, you're getting more and more despicable. Every word that came out of Shen Luo An's mouth was like a venomous dart. Not a single one missed, and every one of his moves was deadly. It was always like that. Guan Kui was beautiful, but she was evil. Her family, her lover, and no one believed her. Yu looked at Shen Luo and chuckled. She averted her eyes and said, "It's up to you whether you believe me or not. I've already conveyed my message. Since Guan Kui has regained consciousness, she probably needs you the most. It's a pity that I've been busy with work lately, so I won't be going back with you to see her. You can go by yourself." Chapter 1397. You're feeling guilty, aren't you? Shen Luo and was already standing in front of Yu. The distance between them was only a step. Are you afraid that you'll feel guilty when you see her? Shen Luo, An's eyes were burning. He looked at Yu with a hint of anticipation. When he realized what he was feeling, Shen Luo and was stunned. What was I anticipating? Hoping that this woman would repent. Hoping that this woman would feel guilty? Shen Luo and laughed at the thought. It wasn't clear whether he was saying it for Yu or himself. Shen Luo and muttered, "How is that possible? If I felt guilty, you would have felt guilty a long time ago." Yu's gaze was calm as she replied, "I've said it before. It wasn't me. I won't admit to anything that wasn't done by me. I said the same thing back then, and I still say the same thing now." The anticipation in Shen Luo An's heart completely dissipated. His gaze returned to coldness. With both hands in his pockets, he asked, "Aren't you going to invite me to your house?" "I'm sorry. I'm not interested." Yu walked around him and prepared to leave. Before she could take a step forward, he grabbed her arm. Shen Luo and stared at her. His gaze was malicious, and his grip was strong. He said, "But I'm very interested. We've been married for more than half a year, and we haven't slept together. You're still a virgin, aren't you? I like to verify it myself." When Yu heard that, her breathing quickened. An indescribable emotion suddenly expanded in her heart and exploded. She waved her hand violently in an attempt to shove his hand away, but all she got was a heart-wrenching pain. "What? You don't dare?" The suspicion that Shen Luo and had been harboring for a long time was confirmed. "Yu, did you cheat on me?" It sounded like a question, but there was no doubt in his tone. Yu's heart skipped a beat. Her face turned red. She gritted her teeth and yelled, "What are you doing? Let go of me." Shen Luo and his masseter muscles tightened, and he tightened his grip on her hand. Yu screamed and yelled, "Help! Let go of me." The commotion between Yu and Shen Luo was very eye-catching at the entrance of the neighborhood. At that moment, Yu's screams attracted the attention of many of the residents. The two burly men who lived in the neighborhood had just parked their car. When they heard Yu shout, they immediately looked over. At first glance, they recognized that the girl was their neighbor. The two of them rushed over and shouted, "What are you doing? Let go." Shen Luo An's heart sank. He loosened his grip and said, "I'm her husband." "No." She thanked the two burly men and ran toward the lobby of the neighborhood. "You're right," Yu said quickly after her hand was released from her grip. The two men didn't know Shen Luo and had never seen him before. When they saw that Yu didn't have a strong reaction, they didn't meddle. However, Shen Luo didn't know which block, which floor, and which room Yu lived in. Now that she had run away, he couldn't find her again. Shen Luo was so angry that he gritted his teeth. But soon, he calmed down and breathed a sigh of relief. He muttered, "Shen Luo, calm down. Wait a minute. Shen Jilia seems to be very familiar with that woman's sister. Furthermore, he was a frequent visitor to Kingstown. He should know which building and which room Yu was staying in." Shen Luo thought for a moment and picked up his phone to call Shen Jilia. Chapter 1398. Shen Jilia was still in the hospital. He had just packed his things and was about to leave when he received a call from Shen Luo. Luo Ren had just picked up his car keys when he saw Shen Jilia pick up the phone. He whistled and asked, "A date with a pretty lady?" "It's my brother." Shenjulia picked up the phone and picked up his backpack. Hello, Shao Ai, are you close to Yi Qianqian? Shenjulia was surprised to hear Yi Qianqian's name from Shen Luo's mouth. As he walked, he asked, What's wrong? How do you know Yi Qianqian? I need to talk to her about something. Do you know where she lives? Give me the address. Shenjulia felt a little strange. Shen Luo, and has something to talk to Yi Qianqian about? Why does it sound so mysterious? Yi Qianqian hates Shen Luoan. Is he going to cause trouble for Yi Qianqian? Shenjulia was silent for a moment before saying, I have a good relationship with Qianqian, but she's always moving. I don't know where she lives now. She used to live in Jinlonggang. Do you want to go there and take a look? Building 305. Go take a look. Jinlonggang? Shen Luo, and looked up at the entrance of the neighborhood. The words Wangjiang No. 1 came into view. Isn't Yi Qianqian living with Yi Yuyu? Shen Luo and frowned and nodded his head. All right, thanks. Brother, why are you looking for her? It's nothing. Go on with your work. All right. Our hospital recently received a special patient. Do you know who it is? Shenjulia walked out with Luo Ran. They were already at the elevator. I wanted to call you to tell you, but I forgot. When Shen Luo heard that, he could vaguely guess what was going on. He asked, Who is it? Guan Kui. Shenjulia entered the elevator. The signal was a little bad. Shen Luo heard a distorted voice coming from the other side of the phone. It wasn't clear. He could only hear the word Guan, but he calmed down and shouted, Who? Say that again. Shenjulia secretly clicked his tongue. Why is she so agitated? Guan Kui. She's the good friend that you and sister-in-law grew up together. She's sister-in-law's older sister, Guan Kui. Guan Kui. It's really her. Is she in your hospital now? Shen Luo's heart ached. The hospital where Shen Luo worked was a psychiatric hospital. Yes, she's not in good spirits, but she can recognize people. The last time I went to see her, she recognized me and asked about you. I told her that you marry my sister-in-law. You told her? Shen Luo's voice was a little solemn. Shenjulia's voice suddenly rang out, and he paused for a moment. I did. Shen Luo asked, How did she react? Shenjulia didn't know what to say. He said, She looked happy, but at the same time, she didn't look too happy. After that, she was pushed away, and I haven't seen her since. I only saw her once. Shen Luo was silent for a moment. He glanced at Yi Yuyu's neighborhood and said, Help me make an appointment. I'll go visit her tomorrow. Aren't you in Kingstown? Will you be back tomorrow? Yes. Oh. Shenjulia stopped in his tracks. I'll make an appointment then. What time will you be arriving tomorrow? 2:00 in the afternoon. Are you alone? Shenjulia had no choice but to turn back. Chapter 1399. Yi Yuyu looked down from the curtains. When she saw Shen Luo's silhouette, the calm lake in her heart began to ripple. What is he doing? Yuyu. Yi Qianqian's voice suddenly rang out, startling Yi Yuyu. Yi Yuyu turned her head and said, You scared me to death. Yi Qianqian didn't think much of it. She giggled and asked, What's wrong with you? What are you looking at? Yi Qianqian looked down. When she saw Shen Luo, she got angry. What's that guy doing here again? Harassing you? No, he's just here to see me. Yi Yuyu said, Pfft, I don't believe you. He didn't even come to see you when you were hospitalized. What nonsense are you talking to me about now? Yi Qianqian rolled her eyes at her. Hey, just leave him be. Yi Yuyu looked down at Shen Luo, with her brows furrowed. Shen Luo, is indeed different from before. Is it really as Li Jinin said? Is there something wrong with his mind? That shouldn't be the case. Shen Luo, is such a capable and intelligent person. He should be able to adjust himself. With that thought, Yi Yuyu relaxed and changed the topic. Where are we eating tonight? At the capital's leading psychiatric hospital. In VIP Room 1, the afterglow of dusk shrouded the room in darkness. A young girl was curled up in the corner, staring at a painting hanging on the wall in front of her. Her eyes were empty, and she was in a daze. There was a sudden knock on the door. A middle-aged man walked in. When he saw the young girl in the room, his eyes were filled with pity. He walked to the wheelchair and squatted down. Are you hungry? He asked softly. The girl's eyes slowly began to glow. She turned her head and gently shook her head. Daddy brought you your favorite cake. Do you want to eat some? The girl shook her head again. Her face was expressionless. She turned her head and continued to stare at the painting. Have some. After you finish one, Daddy has some good news for you. Guan Yanhong coaxed his daughter and said, Come and have some. Guan Kui turned her head to look at her father and gently shook her head. I'm not hungry. Her voice was hoarse. It sounded like the friction between two pieces of wood. It was unpleasant to the ears, but when Guan Yanhong heard it, it was as if he had heard the sound of nature. No matter what, you have to eat some. Do you want to see Shin Luoan? Luoan, those two words, which she hadn't heard in a long time, brought a spark to Guan Kui's eyes. She asked, Did you tell him that I've recovered? Guan Yanhong shook his head. No, but he must have heard about it recently. He made an appointment to visit you tomorrow. Why don't you eat something first? Make him fat so that he'll like you tomorrow. There was finally some color in Guan Kui's eyes. She looked down at the cake in Guan Yanhong's hands and asked, Dad, is Shun Luo married? Guan Yanhong's smile froze as he looked at Guan Kui. Guan Kui's gaze was unexpectedly calm. Guan Yanhong looked at her for a long time before asking, How did you know? With Yi Yu, right? Guan Yanhong hesitated for a moment before nodding his head. Guan Kui lowered her head. Her lips curled into a smile. Very quickly, she burst out laughing. 7 years of nightmares, 7 years of tragedy, 7 years of hesitation, and 7 years of confusion. In those 7 years, Guan Kui hadn't thought about it for a single day. If she hadn't fallen off the cliff back then, would everything have been different? Chapter 1400. The best years of a woman's life had been wasted in vain. Her former lover had become the husband of another woman. Guan Kui's smile widened, and she said, Just you wait. I'll make them pay for what they owe me. Guan Yanhong's heart ached as he looked at his daughter. All he could do was smile and bring the cake to her mouth. It was the 3rd day since Ming returned to Kingstown. Yu Lily stayed with the Shun family in the capital and saw Shun Manting every day. At first, she felt a little awkward, but after a few days together, she got used to it. Although she was used to being with the Shun family, she wasn't used to living alone in the capital. Yu Lily lay on the bed with her phone in her hand and sent Ming an emoji. Yuli, hubby, squinting smile, Yuli, moi Yuli. Rose Ming, Yuli. Squinting smile, what are you doing? Ming. No one is doing it when you're not here, Yuli. How can you be so perverted? Ming. No one is perverted when you're not here, Yuli. Then I'll sneak back to Kingstown, okay? What are you doing? Ming. Okay. I'm working. The photo was of a computer desktop with a large stack of documents. It looked like it was densely packed with words and a lot of data that Yu Lily couldn't understand. Yu Lily didn't even look at it and replied, It's past 9 o'clock, and you're still working. Ming, you're not here, so I can only work. Yu Lily smiled and rolled on the bed with her cell phone in her arms. A silly laugh came out of her mouth. All of a sudden, Yu Lily stood up and clicked on a video call with Ming. Ming picked up quickly. In the background was the wedding photo behind his chair in his office. It seemed like he was still in the office. Yu Lily lay on the bed and said, Why aren't you going home? Men who sleep too much will have kidney problems. Ming smiled and said, Don't worry. Even if I have kidney problems, I can still serve you. Yu Lily said, You're always talking dirty. I miss you. Ming suddenly changed the topic. He pursed his lips and looked a little aggrieved. Hey, why don't I go to the capital tomorrow to look for you? This kind of life is too hard. I want to, but Grandma and Dad both said that we can't meet. Aren't we meeting now? Ming chuckled. You don't have to listen to those old antiques. It's not the same, Yu Lily said. Not seeing each other is probably to increase the mystery. We're already so familiar with each other, so there shouldn't be any mystery left. Yu Lily turned over in bed and said, Hey, let me tell you. Yu Lily turned on her gossipy mode and told him all the gossip she had heard about square dancing and the Shun family's gossips. Ming nodded from time to time and listened with great interest. The two of them chatted until late at night before hanging up reluctantly. Looking at the time, it was already past 11 o'clock. Yu Lily's mouth was a little dry. She got up and put on her shoes to go to the kitchen to get some water. When she passed by the room next door, she heard a stifled cry. Lily stopped in her tracks and turned her head to look. The white door was ajar, and the sound of sobbing could be heard intermittently. It wasn't loud, but it piqued Lily's curiosity. Lily quietly walked over and leaned against the wall, trying to eavesdrop through the crack of the door. However, the sound of sobbing was like an illusion. It was no longer there. Chapter 1401. Lily reached out and gently knocked on the door. It was very quiet inside. It was as if the sound Lily had just heard was really an illusion. Lily stood there for a while. When no one answered, she turned around and prepared to leave. Suddenly, there was a soft sound behind her. She turned around and saw that the door had been opened. It was dark inside. Unwavering was barefoot and wearing a thin nightgown. Her eyes were a little red, and she looked like she had just woken up. Seeing that it was Lily, Unwavering paused and asked, "What's the matter?" Lily stood at the door and felt a little awkward when she heard that. She shook her head and said, "Nothing. I just heard some sounds and felt that you didn't seem very happy, so I came to take a look." Unwavering stood at the door and looked at Lily. After a while, she said, "Thank you." Lily was stunned and a little embarrassed. It's nothing. I'll leave first. Do you want to come in for a chat?" Unwavering's voice wasn't loud, and it was a little soft. She could hear that she wasn't in a good mood. All along, Lily didn't like Unwavering. In fact, she was a little disgusted with her. But after a few days together, Lily realized that Unwavering didn't seem to have any friends. Every day, Lily would go back and forth between the company and home. Lily had accompanied old Mrs. Shun and heard a lot about Unwavering. This girl is very lonely. Lily thought about it and nodded. Unwavering's room was smaller than old Mrs. Shun's, but it was bigger than the guest room that Lily was staying in. What made Lily feel a little strange was that in addition to Unwavering's things, there was also a man's things in the room. The man's tie was on the bedside table. It was particularly conspicuous in this woman's room. "Is it Shun Luoan?" Lily maintained her composure as she walked in. With a smile, she remarked, "Your room is so big." Unwavering smiled and sat on the bed. She asked, "When is your wedding?" "The 8th of next month," Lily said. "It was supposed to be last month, but Ming's mother said that day wasn't very good. The 8th of next month is the best day of the year." "I see. Happy wedding." Unwavering smiled. "Do you know that I envy you so much? Ming is really good to you." This, Lily suddenly regretted coming in. It was awkward to sit in the same room with her man's ex-fiancée and talk about this kind of thing. Haha. Lily laughed dryly. "It's all right. He's always been like this." The smile on Unwavering's face was a little dry and didn't reach her eyes. She asked, "Do you need a bridesmaid at your wedding? I'll be your bridesmaid in Kingstown, okay?" Lily was even more shocked. She looked at Unwavering in astonishment and asked, "You want to be my bridesmaid?" Can I? Since I can't be Ming's bride, I'll be your bridesmaid. When you return to Kingstown, take me with you, okay?" Unwavering looked at Lily with a pleading look in her eyes. Lily felt a little strange. Why would Unwavering make such a request out of nowhere? "I don't have many friends, and I've never been a bridesmaid before. If you don't agree, I may never be one in this life," Unwavering said with a smile. "I can't even be a bride, and I can't even be a bridesmaid." Chapter 1402. Lily had always sympathized with Unwavering. When she heard that, her heart was filled with compassion. After thinking about it, she agreed. After that, Lily and Unwavering didn't have much to talk about. After exchanging a few words, Lily left Unwavering's room. Finally, she went to the kitchen to drink some water before returning to her room. However, the more she thought about it, the more she felt that something was wrong. Why would Unwavering want to be his bridesmaid out of nowhere? Is she plotting something? Lily rolled over and got up. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that something was wrong. She couldn't be blamed for thinking that way. Unwavering really had too many things that worried her. Is she trying to seduce Ming? The more she thought about it, the more certain she was. Lily picked up her phone and sent a text message to Ming. It was the weekend, So Yi Yu didn't go out. She slept until 10 o'clock. When she woke up, the sun was already shining brightly. After washing up and eating breakfast, Yi Yu changed into her sportswear and put on her headphones to go to the gym. When she was out of the neighborhood, Yi Yu looked around. Shen Luo and didn't know her new phone number, and she had blocked his communication app. He didn't even know which building she lived in. Is he waiting for me here? After looking around, she realized that there was no one. Yi Yu breathed a sigh of relief, but at the same time, she felt an inexplicable sense of loss. In the end, he still left. After the gym, Yi Yu received a message from Shun Julia. Sister-in-law, are you here yet? It's almost time. Yi Yu saw the strange WeChat message and was confused. She replied. Immediately after, Shun Julia called. Have you arrived? Didn't you say you were coming to the hospital today? Shun Julia's voice was filled with doubt. Her mood is not very stable. She might not be able to see guests later. What? Brother-in-law, did you get the wrong person? Hearing that, Shun Julia was even more confused. Didn't you go back to the capital with my brother? You said you would visit Guan Kui at 2 in the afternoon. You're not coming? Yi Yu was silent for a moment and said, I don't know. Is Guan Kui in your hospital? Yeah. Didn't my brother tell you? That's weird. No. Yi Yu suddenly thought of the day before. Did he come looking for me just to talk about that? She asked about Guan Kui's recent situation. When she heard that Guan Kui was doing well, she finally agreed and hung up the phone. Guan Kui is awake. She had finally regained consciousness after 7 years. It was time to prove her innocence. What happened back then was the thorn in their side. If Guan Kui could explain things clearly, wouldn't things be fine between them? She was still Yi Yu, and he was still her brother Luoan. Everything was like before. She picked up her phone and booked the earliest flight to the capital. In the small park, the grass sprouted gently, and the branches were just green. The weather was also getting warmer day by day. Yi Tian pushed her wheelchair as she sat in the park. Every now and then, she would see a bird flying by. She would chuckle and point in that direction as she said, Look, Kei Yi, another bird is flying by. Chapter 1403. Yes, but he hasn't arrived yet. Yi Tian looked at her watch and asked, Do you know who's coming today? Luoan. Guan Kui was filled with anticipation, but her eyes quickly became unreadable. And Yu? Yi Tian nodded her head and looked into the distance. With a look of surprise, she said, Look, Luoan is here. When Guan Kui heard that, her eyes lit up. She raised her head and looked in the direction that Yi Tian had pointed. The sun was shining brightly that day. A tall figure walked up. His eyes were the same as they had been in the past, but his facial features were more defined. Shen Luo and was dressed in a casual suit. It was Guan Kui's favorite off-white color. He stepped forward in his clean and shiny leather shoes. With one look, it was obvious that he had put in a lot of effort into his appearance. When Yi Tian saw Shen Luo and in this state, she felt relieved. It seemed that although Shen Luo and was married to her, he hadn't forgotten about Kui at all. Yi Tian stood up and gently pushed the wheelchair forward. Mom, Shen Luo and greeted Yi Tian with a gentle smile. When Guan Kui heard that greeting, she didn't feel very comfortable. Shen Luo and was holding supplements and beautiful flowers in his hands. He handed the flowers to Guan Kui with a gentle smile and said, Long time no see, Kui. Guan Kui looked at Shen Luoan. Her smile widened as she accepted the flowers. Luoan, I've missed you so much. As she spoke, her emotions flowed naturally. Her eyes were filled with longing. I've been thinking about you, Luoan. Me too. Shen Luo and looked at Guan Kui with the same expression as before. He quickly handed the supplements to Yi Tian and said, Mom, I'll take a walk with Kui. Yi Tian nodded her head and quickly left. Shen Luo and looked at her legs. His heart ached as he asked, Are you still not healed? Guan Kui shook her head. The smile on her face was bitter. It's good that they're crippled. It's better than having my legs healed and not being able to dance in the future. Nonsense. You'll get better. Shen Luo and gently placed his hand on her shoulder. I thought you wouldn't wake up. It's great to see that you're awake. Luon, I woke up a long time ago. It's just that I didn't want to see anyone, Guan Kui said gravely. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. I'm afraid I'll act up and beat you up. Wouldn't that be a grave sin for me? With that, the two of them looked at each other and smiled. By the time she reached the capital, it was already past 7 p.m. She asked for Shun Julia's address and instructed him not to tell anyone about it. Then, she hailed a cab from the airport to the hospital where Guan Kui was staying. However, Guan Kui wasn't in the room. Just as she was about to ask the front desk, she heard a familiar male voice. Shen Luo An's voice sounded very cheerful. He was slowly approaching them as he spoke. She turned her head, and Shen Luo and looked over at the same time. Their eyes met, and they were speechless. The air was inexplicably quiet. Yi Yu had specially dressed up that day. She was wearing the season's latest dress and a pair of pretty and luxurious sandals. She looked very dignified. When Guan Kui saw Yi Yu, her hands gripped the sides of the wheelchair tightly. She glared at Yi Yu. Her breathing was heavy, and her eyes reddened. She gritted her teeth and growled, Yi Yu. Chapter 1404. Yi Yu stood where she was and called out, Sister. Guan Kui's eyes were bloodshot as she screamed. She stretched out her arms, and her entire body fell forward. She fell from the wheelchair onto the ground. This scene gave everyone a fright. Shen Luo and jumped and instinctively went over to help Guan Kui up. Yi Yu ran over as well. Before she could get close, she heard Guan Kui's cries. Yi Yu, Yi Yu, why did you do this to me? Why? Yi Yu stopped in her tracks. She looked at Guan Kui in a daze. She found it hard to believe. When Shen Luo and heard Guan Kui's cries, his expression turned to one of annoyance. He yelled, Get lost! Yi Yu stood rooted to the ground as she watched Guan Kui being carried by Shen Luo. Her heart ached. Guan Kui buried herself in Shen Luo An's arms and wailed. Her hands clutched his shirt. As she cried, she said, I know you like Shen Luo but why did you ruin my life? My life could have been as beautiful as yours. Why? Shen Luo An's grip on Guan Kui tightened. In a low voice, he comforted her. It's okay. Don't be afraid. It's all in the past. Don't cry. Be a good girl. Guan Kui cried even harder. She clutched his shirt tightly and said, Luo and Shen Luo An's heart ached even more. The hatred in his eyes grew as he looked at Yi Yu. In an angry voice, he yelled, Get lost. Yi Yu carried Guan Kui back into the ward. She stood there in a daze. She helped push the wheelchair into the room. When she entered, she saw Shen Luo and gently covering Guan Kui with a blanket. This kind of gaze, this kind of gentle action, had also appeared in front of her not so long ago. However, after that incident, there had been no more. Shen Luo and Guan Kui's crying gradually stopped. She squinted her eyes as if she didn't know Yi Yu had entered. Has Yi Yu left? Shen Luo and turned his head and looked at Yi Yu. His eyes darkened. He turned his head back and replied, She's left. Guan Kui seemed to feel even more grieved. She sobbed softly and said, I'm sorry. I still can't forgive her. Luon, I'm your good friend, right? You won't leave me, will you? Shen Luo An's heart ached even more. He sat on the edge of the bed and said softly, Don't talk nonsense. Go to sleep if you're tired. I'll stay here with you. Guan Kui sobbed. She closed her eyes and said, Actually, I can understand why you pushed me off the cliff all those years ago. At that time, Buzz, Yi Yu's mind was clouded. An indescribable rage spread from her tailbone to her entire body. Almost instinctively, she yelled, Bullsh *T. Guan Kui looked as if she had been given a fright. Her body trembled violently. She opened her eyes and looked in Yi Yu's direction. In a daze, she said, Yu, Guan Kui. Yi Yu walked forward and glared at Guan Kui. She was furious. You were the one who fell that night. Why are you framing me? No wonder everyone blamed me all these years. Even Shen Luo and didn't trust me. So, Guan Kui said it herself. Chapter 1405. How could that be? Hasn't Guan Kui been in a coma ever since that night? After she fainted, Guan Kui had been in a half-asleep state. She hadn't been in a good state. When she found out that her legs had been paralyzed, she had lost her mind and been sent to a mental hospital. It had been 7 years. For the past 7 years, everyone had blamed her, resented her, and hated her. They had said that Yi Yuyu had been jealous of Guan Kui and had pushed her off the cliff. Yi Yuyu had been unable to defend herself. She had been waiting and enduring. She had been waiting for Guan Kui to wake up and prove her innocence. She had wanted Guan Kui to explain herself that it had been a stormy night and she had accidentally stepped on nothing and fallen off the cliff. Who would have thought that such a public opinion and such words would come from Guan Kui's own mouth? Yi Yuyu couldn't believe it. The anger and complicated feelings in her heart instantly filled her. The 7 years of suffering and the 7 years of enduring had all been wishful thinking on her part. In their hearts, they no longer believed her. No one believed her. Yi Yuyu looked at Shun Luo and her eyes burned and her vision blurred. Brother Luo, and it wasn't me. It really wasn't me. She fell off on her own. When Guan Kui heard Yi Yuyu's words, she hugged Shin Luo, Anne's arm, and curled up into a ball. She cried even harder. Her sobs were intermittent, and she sobbed with great difficulty. She was like a frightened pet. Her eyes looked at Yi Yuyu with fear. Luo and Guan Kui hugged Shin Luo, and her body trembled violently. Luo, save me. She wants to kill me. Hurry up and chase her away. Hurry. Shin Luo and hugged Guan Kui, his childhood sweetheart who had finally regained consciousness. The anger in his chest was about to burst out. He turned his head and roared, "Get lost! What are you still doing here?" Yi Yuyu was stunned by his roar, but she didn't move. The tears in her eyes gathered even more. She looked at Shin Luo and raised her hand to wipe her tears. Biting her lower lip, she yelled, "Guan Kui, do you dare to touch your own conscience and say it? Did I push you off that year? In front of Brother Luo and touch your conscience and swear? What happened that year? Tell me." Guan Kui hugged Shin Luo and her body trembled even more violently, and she cried even louder. "Why are you doing this to me? I'm already a cripple. Yuyu, aren't we sisters? You said that we were going to be good sisters for life. Why are you forcing me like this?" Shin Luo and was even more furious. He picked up an apple from the fruit plate at the head of the bed and threw it at Yi Yuyu. He roared, "Get lost!" The huge apple smashed into Yi Yuyu's chest. For a moment, the impact numbed her entire body. Thud! The apple fell to the ground, bounced a few times, and rolled back to Shin Luo's feet. The part of Yi Yuyu's chest that had been smashed felt as if it had been rotted. The pain spread through her internal organs and every nerve in her body. There was no leeway. When Shin Luo heard the muffled sound, he seemed to come back to his senses. There was a look of astonishment in his eyes as he looked down at the apple on the ground. Chapter 1406. That smile completely shattered any hope Yi Yuyu had of getting lucky. Guan Kui, she didn't misunderstand. She did it on purpose. She framed me on purpose to make everyone hate me, didn't she? The corner that she had been holding on to all this time seemed to crumble. She had thought that as long as Guan Kui woke up, the world would clear her name. Who would have thought that Guan Kui's awakening would not bring her dawn? Instead, it would bring her endless darkness? This kind of darkness, layer by layer, covered her closest family, covered her true love, and now, even her future was a blur. She looked at Shun Luo and Guan Kui hugging each other in front of her. Their deep feelings for each other made her appear even more like a joke. Yi Yuyu's vision was blurry, but her rationality prevented her from crying in front of them. She forced herself to remain calm and laugh coldly as she looked at them. Her gaze was filled with sorrow and seemed to be watery, but it was also filled with an indescribable pity. She seemed to sympathize with Guan Kui and Shun Luo, or perhaps both. When Shun Luo saw the look in her eyes, he felt an inexplicable ache in his heart. For some strange reason, Shun Luo and felt guilty and guilty. He opened his mouth and said, "You," at the corners of Yi Yu's lips curled up in a smile. The sarcasm was clear in her words. Without waiting for Shen Luo and to finish his sentence, she had already turned around and walked out of the ward with her head held high. Yi Yu's back view was frail and stubborn. It was as clean as when she had carried her luggage and separated from the Guan family. There was no reluctance. Shen Luo panicked. He instinctively let go of Guan Kui and stood up. Just as he was about to walk away, Shen Luo stopped. "Ah!" A scream came from behind him. Guan Kui hugged her head. Her hair was disheveled, and her face was pale. Her expression was one of despair. Luon. Shen Luo stopped in his tracks. He froze on the spot, unsure of where to go. Guan Kui dragged her body over with both hands. She reached out for Shen Luo. Her face was covered in tears. "Don't go. Please don't leave me." Shen Luo was in so much pain that he was trembling. The screams in his ears intensified the intensity of the pain. Even he didn't know if he was hurting for Yi Yu or Guan Kui. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down. He felt his throat go dry. He turned around and supported Guan Kui. In a gentle voice, he said, "It's all right. I'm not leaving." It was as if Guan Kui had grabbed onto a life-saving straw. She grabbed onto Shen Luo's hands and buried her head into his embrace. Her tears turned into a smile. Guan Kui, who was crying tears of joy, didn't miss out on the man beside her. As he held her up, his gaze lingered on the door. Her hands gripped him even tighter. Guan Kui didn't want to let go at all. Her breathing was heavy, and the hatred in her eyes deepened. Yi Yu didn't know how long she had been walking. The view in front of her was getting wider and wider, but her vision was getting blurry. After entering the hospital elevator, Yi Yu couldn't hold it in any longer. She covered her mouth and sobbed softly. Chapter 1407. She lowered her head and walked forward. The darkness around her seemed to once again obscure her vision, and she lost her sense of direction. The passing cars, the walking townsfolk, and the warm yellow street lights shone down, but the atmosphere in the sky was overshadowed by the liveliness, making the surroundings even more gloomy. The gloomy atmosphere made Yi Yu's heart tremble with pain. All the nerves in her body began to convulse uncontrollably. Her head spun, and she couldn't take it anymore. She squatted down and burst into tears. The passers-by noticed Yi Yu, but they only took a few glances. No one went forward to comfort her. Rumble! Lightning flashed across the gloomy dark clouds. The muffled sound of thunder warned the passers-by to take shelter. After the thunderous roar, bean-sized raindrops fell impatiently, hitting people's hair and faces, making them feel cold and numb. Clatter! The rain grew heavier. Yi Yu squatted on the ground. Her strength seemed to have been drained. Her choked sobs were almost inaudible in the noisy rain. The people who took shelter from the rain ran quickly. Their footsteps splashed water, and the water was covered up again. Children without umbrellas had to run hard, because they had to hurry home so that they wouldn't be caught in the rain. What about children without homes? Yi Yu laughed at herself and hugged herself even tighter. Suddenly, the sound of the rain seemed to have softened. The cold rain that had been falling continuously was also stopped. Yi Yu was stunned. She raised her head and opened her wet and hazy eyes. The first thing she saw was a sharp, clear, and cold face. The pair of eyes that were as calm as the wind, and the moon looked at Yi Yu calmly. It was like an ancient spring, and no one could read his emotions. Yi Yu looked at the man in front of her in a daze. She blinked and looked at him a few times, but his face was still the same. Is it cool? His voice was cold, and she couldn't tell whether he was happy or angry. She held the big black umbrella with her well-defined knuckles, completely protecting her body. Yi Yu opened her mouth, but she didn't know what to say. She looked down at herself. She was drenched, and she seemed to be in a sorry state. Let's go. Li Jinan couldn't help but pull her up. He stuffed the umbrella into her hands and took off his suit jacket to drape it over her. A scorching warmth enveloped her. She felt a lump in her throat, and tears started to well up in her eyes again. Li Jinan acted as if he hadn't seen it. He took the umbrella back, put one arm around her shoulder, and led her to his car. When she got into the car, Yu was still dripping with water. She shrunk her hands and feet cautiously. She was afraid that she would dirty herself further. Li Jinan glanced at her, took out a handkerchief from his pocket, and threw it to her. Then he drove steadily. After getting into the car, Li Jinan didn't say a word. Yu took the handkerchief and gently wiped her face and hair. She turned her head and stole a glance at Li Jinan. Li Jinan's side profile was chiseled, and the lines of his jaw were tight. His lips were pursed tightly, and he looked a little unhappy. Yu shrunk her feet and lowered her head to look at the handkerchief in her hand. In a low voice, she said, "Thank you, GM Li." After she opened her mouth, Yu realized that her voice was a little hoarse. It was choked with sobs, and she sounded even more pathetic. Chapter 1408. Yu's hair stood on end from his stare. She lowered her head in confusion and asked, "GM Li, why are you here?" The headquarters of NC Entertainment is in Kingstown. As the CEO, why is Li Jinan always heading to the capital? When she asked that question, Li Jinan's gaze deepened as he looked at Yu. He slowly said, "You can ask your sister that question. Get out of the car." "My sister? Yi Qianqian?" Yu was stunned for a moment. She looked out the window. It was a famous 5-star platinum hotel in the capital. When she saw the hotel, Yu's body stiffened. She turned her head to look at Li Jinan. Yu was unwilling to move. She asked, "GM Li, what are we doing here?" "I'm taking a shower, changing into some clean clothes, and getting some rest." Li Jinan's voice was calm. It was impossible to tell whether he was happy or angry. His eyes were calm and steady. Yu was still unwilling to get out of the car. She said, "Let's go to my place. It's not far from here. I have clothes at home. I can go back and change." When Li Jinan heard that, his hand that had been unbuckling his seatbelt paused. He turned his head to look at Yu with a half-smile and asked, "Are you inviting me to stay at your place?" Yu immediately shook her head. "No." Li Jinan buckled his seatbelt back in. Without another word, he turned the car around and was on the main road. "Which direction? Why don't you go to the hotel? I'll go back on my own." Yu was a little scared. The feeling of being drenched was unbearable. Even though the heater was turned on, Yu still felt a little chilly. She had been frightened by this guy. Li Jinan didn't reply. He looked left and right and asked, "Left, right?" "Yes." After Yu answered, she suddenly realized something. She nervously clenched her fists. "GM Li, I'll send you back," Li Jinan said. He glanced at her casually. "I don't stay at a stranger's house." When Yu heard that, she let out a sigh of relief and calmed down. Very quickly, they arrived at Yu's place. Li Jinan opened the car door and took out an umbrella. He opened the door to the front passenger seat to cover her head. Yu carefully got out of the car and looked down at her soaked clothes. The pink dress outlined the lines of her bra. Through the thin spring clothes, the spring scenery inside was faintly discernible. She instinctively tightened her jacket and crossed her arms as she walked beside Li Jinan. Li Jinan used to be a soldier. Normally, she wouldn't have felt it. However, the moment he stood next to her, she could feel the awe-inspiring aura emanating from his bones. It made her tremble slightly. For some reason, she felt a sense of nervousness. She entered the password and opened the door. She let her hair down and asked, "GM Li, what would you like to drink?" Li Jinan didn't feel like a guest at all. As soon as he came in, he sat on the sofa, supported his head with his hands, rubbed his temples, and said firmly, "No, go take a shower." Yu's body stiffened. Does that mean that he has no intention of leaving? Li Jinan noticed that she was looking at him strangely. He looked up and raised his eyebrows. "Do you know how to shower? Do you need help?" Chapter 1409. For some reason, Yu felt nervous. This man, is he really going to spend the night at my place? No, that can't be. He had said it himself that he wouldn't. This guy wouldn't go back on his word and slap himself in the face. Furthermore, I don't think we're particularly close. Am I right? Yu felt a little mystified. She walked into the bathroom with her heart in her mouth. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her hair was messy and dripping wet. Her face was pale, and her eyes were red and swollen. The makeup she had put on before leaving the house had been ruined. There were 2 large dark circles under her eyes. From the looks of it, the word battered was not enough to describe it. Yu laughed bitterly. She felt that she was a pitiful fool. How could I be so narcissistic as to think that Li Jinan was trying to wound me in this state? It was most likely that he was just pitiful. Yu looked into the mirror and reached out to touch the spot where her heart had been smashed. She pressed it gently. That apple wasn't just an apple. Li Jinan looked around the living room. The large photo hanging in the living room was a photo poster of Yu. It was very fashionable and high in black and white. It looked exquisite and beautiful. Li Jinan raised his eyebrows in satisfaction. He had thought that she would enlarge the wedding photo and hang it in her apartment. But then he realized that it was a bachelor's apartment. Yes, it was a marriage of convenience. Since it was a marriage of convenience, it meant that they didn't live together or sleep together. Nothing that shouldn't have happened had happened. Li Jinan's mood brightened at that thought. Under the large photo, he saw a few small ornaments. They looked like they were made of clay. There were a few smiling dolls. One of them looked similar to Yu and the boy next to it. Could it be Shin Luoan? Li Jinan picked up the boy and flipped it over. Indeed, he saw the word "an" at the bottom. The other dolls had the words K and Yu written below them. K was probably the stepsister that Yi Qianqian had mentioned. The former ballet genius who had become paralyzed in both legs, Guan Kui. Li Jinan felt that it was a pity for that girl, but his eyes didn't linger on her. He turned and walked into the kitchen. The fridge was empty. There was nothing inside. Moreover, everything was very clean, and many things were covered up. It was obvious that she had not been back since she returned from Kingstown. After another round of observation, Yu slowly emerged from the room. Her hair was blow-dried and loose, and she walked out in a casual home suit. Her face was bare, and she looked very clean. Li Jinan glanced at it and calmly replied, "It's much cleaner than before." As he spoke, he glanced at his watch. "It's past 8 p.m. I haven't eaten yet. Have you?" Yu was already hungry. When she heard that, she shook her head and replied, "There's a restaurant downstairs that's pretty good. You'll be able to eat there when you get down." Was this the meaning of sending the guest off? What kind of person was Li Jinan? How could he not understand? But he pretended not to hear and said, "I want to eat noodles. Do you know how to make it? Let's go buy ingredients together." He didn't care whether Yu agreed to it or not, or whether she was willing to do it or not. Chapter 14:10. Yu didn't move. She stood rooted to the spot and looked at him. After a long time, she lowered her head and said, "GM Lee, thank you for today, but I'm not in the mood. So, please leave quickly and don't bother me anymore." Naturally, the meaning behind his words was self-evident. Li Jinan didn't have the slightest intention of leaving. He stood there with a vexed expression and said, "What a coincidence. I'm not in a good mood either. Sigh, it's all because I'm hungry. Why don't you take me to the nearby supermarket? I'll buy some food. There's a supermarket downstairs at the entrance of the estate, but the vegetables should be sold out by now. Even if there's still some left, they won't be fresh." So, she didn't want to go. Yuyu's words were vague, but she knew that Li Jinan would understand. Li Jinan didn't seem to understand what she was trying to say. He nodded his head and said, "It's fine. Let's go. If we don't go now, we won't be able to buy anything that isn't fresh." "Jim Lee, I'm not in the mood to cook," she said. "It's fine," Li Jinan immediately replied. His expression was impassive as he said, "I'll do it, but I have no sense of direction. Even if you tell me where it is, I might not be able to find it. Besides, I'm not familiar with this place. What if I get lost?" Yu was speechless. He's a grown man. How could he get lost? Yu was at a loss for words. Since he had already put it that way, it would be rude of her to reject him. She thought about it and changed her shoes. She followed Li Jinan down the stairs in silence. When they reached the supermarket, many of the shelves were empty. After he entered, he looked left and right, while Yi Yu stood to the side. What should I buy? I've never bought vegetables before. Is this vegetable okay? Li Jinan picked up a handful of dried rapeseed. I think I've seen my mother cook this before. It's quite delicious. As he spoke, he tossed the rapeseed into the basket. Yi Yu took a look and frowned. Didn't you say you wanted to cook noodles? Yeah, with this vegetable. Yi Yu found it a little ridiculous. She put the vegetable back and walked over to grab a bunch of lettuce. This is the best way to cook noodles. Is that so? Li Jinan looked enlightened. Do I still need to buy eggs? Well, do you want scallions? Eat, he blurted out. Coriander? I'm not picky. Yi Yu glanced at him, then turned to look at the fresh produce section. She saw the red finger peppers and asked, Do you eat spicy food? Since he's from Kingstown, he shouldn't be able to handle spicy food. He looked at her and asked in return, Do you like it? I like it. Eat. Yi Yu grabbed a bag and placed it in the basket. She then took some noodles and made her way to the living area. Li Jinan watched as Yi Yu picked up a tube of toothpaste, a toothbrush, and a variety of toiletries for each person. Only one person. Was it for her own use or for him? Li Jinan's mind was a little active. He was a little distracted on the way. After paying the bill with Yi Yu, he returned to her house and took the groceries to the kitchen. Yi Yu put the groceries down and walked into the kitchen, only to find that the vegetables had been washed into a mess. That's not washing vegetables. That's practically torturing vegetables. GM Li, do you know how to cook? Li Jinan turned to look at her and answered honestly, No. Dash. Chapter 14:11. He wouldn't take on everything so easily. Yi Yu suddenly felt speechless. She looked at him and walked up to him helplessly. She took the things from his hands and said, Go boil the water. Li Jinan deeply felt that he was being ignored. He rubbed his nose and replied, Okay. After looking around, Li Jinan finally found a kettle to boil water. After filling the water dispenser, he placed it on the stove to boil. Yi Yu was focused on arranging the ingredients. When she turned around and saw that Li Jinan had used a kettle, her expression became complicated. She looked at him and asked, GM Li, are you thirsty? I'm not thirsty. Then why are you boiling the water? Li Jinan frowned and looked at her with confusion. He asked, Weren't you the one who asked me to boil it? Yi Yu was speechless. Yi Yu was speechless. Without a word, she turned around and poured the half-boiled water into a clean pot. Li Jinan watched from the side as she busied herself. He felt a little guilty and asked, Do you need my help? Yi Yu looked at him and sighed helplessly. Help me get the bowls and chopsticks. They're in the disinfecting cabinet. Okay. Li Jinan took 2 pairs of chopsticks and 2 bowls. He placed them on the table that Yi Yu had just wiped. Following that, he went in to help carry the noodles out. The noodles had just been cooked, and they were hot to the touch. Li Jinan's hand touched the handle of the pot and was caught off guard. He immediately pulled his hand back. Yi Yu was shocked. She hurried forward and asked, Are you all right? As she spoke, she pried Li Jinan's hand open. When she saw the burn mark left by the metal handle, her frown deepened. She pulled Li Jinan to the sink and turned on the tap to wash it. How could you be so careless? How could you touch a pot that's just been cooked? You're not a child anymore. Don't you have any common sense? Yi Yu muttered as she carefully rubbed some detergent on his hand. Her movements were light and gentle. There was a prickling pain from the burn, but it was nothing to Li Jinan. But being held in Yi Yu's small, soft hand somehow made him feel better. The corners of Li Jinan's lips curled up slightly. His dark eyes stared at the top of her dark head. The faint fragrance of her hair drifted over, and it made his mood change subtly. It was the first time that he had been so close to a woman. Even when he was teaching Su Qianxi, he had never been so close to her. This feeling seemed pretty good. Yi Yu lowered her head to help Li Jinan rinse the water. When she raised her head, she saw Li Jinan staring at her from the reflective wall. She let go of him and said, I'll be fine after I wash up. Aren't you hungry? Let's eat the noodles first. You'll be fine after applying some ointment later. With that, she turned around and quickened her pace. Li Jinan looked at his hand and said, "There are still bubbles." "Don't you have bubbles on your hands?" Yi Yu looked down at her hand. White foam was on it. He was walking too fast just now, so he didn't notice this problem. She seemed to have overreacted a little. Yi Yu's face heated up for no apparent reason. She awkwardly retracted her hand and quickened her pace as she replied, "No." Chapter 14:12. After washing his hands, Li Jinan took the bowl of noodles out and divided it into two bowls. Yi Yu slowly walked out of the kitchen. Li Jinan sat down and said, "Dig in. It looks delicious." Yi Yu's lips twitched. She sat across from him and said, "Give it a try." Li Jinan didn't stand on ceremony. He picked up the chopsticks and put it into his mouth. Yi Yu was shocked and reminded him, "Be careful, it's hot." "I'm not afraid." Li Jinan ate as if he had tasted the best delicacy in the world. "It's really delicious. Are you good at cooking?" Yi Yu shook her head. "I only know how to cook noodles. I don't know anything else." Li Jinan nodded his head. His gaze shifted to her face and then back to the bowl in front of her. He didn't stop eating. In no time, he had finished the bowl. When he looked up, he realized that Yi Yu's bowl hadn't been touched. "It won't taste good when it's cold," Li Jinan reminded her. Yi Yu pushed the bowl toward him and said, "The temperature should be just right at this time. You should eat this bowl too. Aren't you hungry?" Yi Yu shook her head. Her eyes were clear and bright. Li Jinan didn't move. He picked up the noodles from a pot and put them in his bowl. There was exactly one bowl left. He said, "Eat it. No matter how bad your mood is, don't let yourself go hungry." "No, I'm just tired. I want to sleep." Yi Yu was obviously not in the mood. As she spoke, she stood up and said, "Leave after you finish eating. Leave the bowl and chopsticks here. I'll wash them tomorrow." Li Jinan didn't know what had happened that day, but he could tell from her expression that she was in a terrible mood. "Eat before you sleep. You got off the plane this afternoon and stayed in the hospital for so long. You probably haven't had dinner yet." Li Jinan stood up and walked in her direction. "After you finish eating, I'll take you somewhere to relax." "GM, I'm not in the mood." Yi Yu looked at Li Jinan with impatience in her eyes. Li Jinan pretended not to understand. He turned her over and said, "You have to eat even if you're not in the mood. I'll leave after you finish eating." Yi Yu was speechless. Why hadn't she realized that he was so thick-skinned? Yi Yu turned her head and saw the delicious noodles that night. In the end, she sat down and picked up her chopsticks. She picked up a mouthful and placed it in her mouth. When the smell entered her nose, Yi Yu couldn't help but sniff. This was the smell of a noodle restaurant that Shenluo liked to frequent when he was a teenager. On Shenluo's 21st birthday, she went to the noodle restaurant to learn cooking skills from a master in order to surprise him. When the young Shenluo arrived late, he was so touched that his eyes turned red. He hugged her in front of everyone, looked at her, and said word by word, "In the future, you'll make noodles for me for the rest of my life." It was not a question, but a vow. Back then, they seemed to have become a couple, kissing each other under the cheers of all their friends and family. Everyone had witnessed their beautiful promise. She thought that from that moment on, their relationship was eternal. But who knew that in the blink of an eye, only 7 or 8 years had passed, everything had changed. Tears fell down uncontrollably. It fell into the bowl and blended with the fragrant soup, making it difficult to tell which drop it belonged to. Chapter 14:13. Yi Yu's breathing became heavier and heavier. She couldn't contain the sadness in her heart. The deepest part of her heart ached uncontrollably. Layer by layer, it was so bitter that she couldn't help but cramp. Li Jinan didn't make a sound. He stood behind her and stared at her. Yi Yu quietly sobbed. She didn't cry out loud, but it made his heart ache more than if she had wailed. Her hand that was holding the chopsticks poked at her mouth from time to time. In the end, she hadn't eaten much. Li Jinan raised his hand and gently placed it on her shoulder. With his other hand, he moved the bowl in front of her away and snatched her chopsticks away. He pulled out 2 pieces of tissue and handed them to her. Yu Yu stared at the tissue in front of her in a daze. She sniffed and took it from him to wipe her nose. She composed herself and breathed a sigh of relief. In a relaxed tone, she said, "GM Lee, it's getting late. You'd better go back first. If the neighbors see you alone, it won't be good." Her tone was relaxed, but her nasal voice clearly betrayed her current state. Li Jinan pursed his lips into a thin line. He looked at her straight back and tightened his grip on her shoulder. He tugged at her and said, "Let's go." Yi Yu was stunned. She turned her head to look at the man behind her. Li Jinan's eyes were deep and dark. When she looked into them, they were as clear as the moon. They were bright and full of life. It was as if they contained limitless water and were bottomless. "Let's go for a walk." Li Jinan's voice was gentle. There was no room for negotiation. "I'll take you to a fun place." "I don't want to go." Yi Yu sat where she was and looked at him. Her reddened eyes were slightly moist. Li Jinan's gaze deepened as he said, "You skipped work this afternoon. Do you know that?" "Of course not. I clearly took a day off." "The supervisor didn't agree. That means you skipped work. Now that I'm the boss, I have the right to ask you to work overtime." Li Jinan's voice was calm as he enunciated each word clearly. "Let's go. Just treat it as work. Let's go and relax." Yu Yu was a little angry. She retorted, "You're behaving like a hooligan. What kind of boss is that? Isn't the one in front of you?" The corners of Li Jinan's mouth curled up slightly. "If it weren't for the fact that my employees were disobedient, I wouldn't have to use such a method." "Missy, let's go." "Where?" Yi Yu was a little resistant. "It's so late, and I'm tired. Why don't you go by yourself?" "No, let's go together." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Yu's outfit. "Go change into something you can wear outside." He glanced at his watch. "I'll give you 5 minutes. Otherwise, I'll deduct half a month's salary from you and inform the company." Yi Yu gritted her teeth and glared at him. Mira was the one who introduced her to this job. If her salary was deducted for half a month and the company reported it, Mira would lose face. This person was simply despicable. Yi Yu gritted her teeth and returned to her room. She changed into a more normal commuter dress. It was conservative and restrained, making her look dignified and mature. Li Jinan nodded his head. "That's commendable. Let's go." He walked toward the door. Li Jinan opened the door and gestured to Yi Yu. Yi Yu stomped over and changed into a pair of high heels. She was surprised to find that her mood was no longer as heavy as it had been before. Chapter 14:14. She was clearly the one being bullied, but she didn't feel the slightest bit oppressed. Li Jinan saw that she wasn't moving. He nudged her gently and said, "Let's go." Yi Yu felt as if she had been electrocuted. She quickly straightened her back and walked forward with her head held high. The place that Li Jinan was referring to was a bar. The bar was different from what Yi Yu had imagined. It was very noisy inside, and there were many people. The lighting wasn't one of those exaggerated, colorful lights. Instead, it was a warm, romantic yellow. The music that was playing wasn't the kind that would blow up in a normal bar. Instead, it was a classic Cantonese song. The song that was playing was Beyond. The familiar melody easily stirred one's heart. A group of people inside started singing along with the rhythm. Their voices were loud and orderly. It was Yi Yu's first time there. Being let in by Li Jinan was a novel experience. "Hey, who's this? Isn't that our Major Li?" A dark-skinned man walked over. His tight shirt accentuated his figure perfectly. He had broad shoulders, a narrow waist, a perky butt, and long legs. The lines of his face were very defined. One look, and you could tell that he was a tough guy. As he spoke, he whistled and shouted in a loud voice, "Gather! Greetings, sir." Many people looked over when they heard the voice. When they saw Li Jinan, they were obviously very surprised. "Third brother. Major Li. Third brother?" Li Jinan smiled faintly. When he turned his head, he saw the surprised expression on Yi Yu's face. He explained, "This is a bar opened by my comrade. Most of the people here are our own people." When a man who had come up to greet her heard that, he quickly said, "Don't be fooled by the number of our own people here. There are quite a few customers, too. Many of them are regulars. Nice to meet you, lady. My name is Wu Run. I'm third brother's comrade." Wu Run, Mooncake? Yu found that name a little strange. She reached out and gently placed her hand on Wu Ren's and said, "Nice to meet you. My name is Yu. Wu Ren whistled and said, "What a beautiful name. You're the first girl that our third brother has brought over. You're so pretty. Third brother, you have good taste." Yu was a little embarrassed. Had they misunderstood something? He looked up at Li Jinan and realized that there was no change in his expression. In a low voice, he said, "Don't spout nonsense. She's one of my artists. She wasn't in a good mood, so I brought her here to have some fun." An artist under him? If she was really just a subordinate, why would he bring her here? Wu Ren raised his eyebrows and smiled. Who was he? He was Li Jinan's comrade in arms and old friend, and he was also an expert in running a bar. When she heard that, she had a pretty good idea of Li Jinan's relationship with the girl and how it had progressed. Wu Ren raised his eyebrows and gave Li Jinan a look before turning his head around and shouting, "The event starts at 10. Get to your positions." As she said that, she turned to look at Li Jinan and smiled frivolously. What a coincidence. It's exactly 10 o'clock. Buzz. The surrounding lights were turned off in an instant, and the sound system seemed to have been radiated, producing an ear-piercing sound. Yu frowned. The next moment, a light appeared on the stage in the middle of the bar. "Good evening, everyone." A man's voice rang out. The non-standard Chinese accent made it sound a little comical. "Welcome to the Restless Night Bar. Dash." Chapter 14:15. Before Yu could react to the foreigner's accent, there was a sudden commotion. With a loud bang, loud music began to play. Yu was caught off guard. Her body trembled as she stared blankly in front of her. When Li Jinan saw her reaction, his lips curled into a smile. He gave her a gentle push and said, "Let's go have some fun." Before Yu could react, her body was pushed into the crowd. Many men and women were dancing together. They were twisting their hips in a provocative manner. The scene left Yu speechless. This bar was indeed different from other bars. The change in style was too drastic. What a restless night. Everyone needs to get excited. Yo! The deafening music and the dancing men and women were completely different from when Yu had just entered. Tonight's game is going to be interesting. I believe that everyone has heard of truth or dare, right? The foreigner deliberately lowered his Mandarin, which made the crowd laugh. Someone whistled from below. That's a big scale. Yo! Truth or dare? Did Lao Wu see third brother coming over and do this on purpose? Where's third brother? Third brother! Third brother! Third brother! From the initial shout, the entire venue was soon filled with shouts. Li Jinan was quickly surrounded. Some sharp-eyed people noticed Yu beside Li Jinan and started to make a fuss again. Is the 10,000-year-old iron tree blooming? This must be third sister-in-law, right? No wonder third brother hasn't been coming out to play recently. Hello, third sister-in-law. Hello, third sister-in-law. The crowd's voices grew louder and louder. Yu was a little numb from all the shouting. When she heard them call her third sister-in-law, she felt even more embarrassed. Just as she was about to wave her hand to explain, Li Jinan reached for a microphone and said, "Don't spout nonsense. She's in a bad mood, so I brought her out to relax. Don't bully her. Our relationship isn't what you think it is." Oh, the crowd began to make a fuss. Our relationship isn't what we think it is. Are you already married? Third brother, you're so mean. To think that I washed your socks when I was in the army. You're really something. Li Jinan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "Aren't you guys annoying? I already said it wasn't." TSK. Yu felt even more embarrassed. She looked at Li Jinan and felt a little awkward. All right, let's get back to business. Since you're here, you won't be in a bad mood. Come, let's get excited. The scene was fiery hot, the music was restless, and the atmosphere was lively. A girl walked over and tugged Yu along. Come on, let's play together. Do you like to sing? Let's go sing together. Why are you singing? I can tell that she's a dancer, just by looking at her good figure. Come, come, come. Let's do it together. At first, Yu was a little resistant. When she turned her head, she saw that the clothes on the two girls were very normal. They weren't like the girls in the bar who were dressed very skimpily. He turned his head and looked around again. He found that there were many girls here, and they were all dressed very normally. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.